dangerous and unusual place for tourism. Do you like horror movies and weird landscapes? Do you like riddles and unexplained phenomena? Great! Then you'll definitely like the Mystery Flesh Pit. This is a wide tunnel, so large that the Eiffel Tower could fit inside it, and its depth is still unknown. But the point is that this tunnel seems to be a living creature. It's a giant monster that breathes, makes sounds, and can even move and affect your mood. If you're intrigued, come to the Permian Basin in West Texas. Here you can book a hotel with windows facing the giant meat hole, enjoy a delicious breakfast, and take amazing photos of this frightening phenomenon. But the most incredible thing is that you can go on an excursion into the depths of this monster. Don't worry, all of our employees are real professionals with extensive skills in diving into the meat pit. During this journey, you can touch the creature with your hands, see unknown beasts living inside this organism, and take a seashell from the endless labyrinth with you as a keepsake. Enjoy your unforgettable vacation, a trip to the Mystery Meat Pit. The cost of excursions is not included in the package. You should check the prices with your tour operator. You've just heard a big fake created on Reddit by an artist named Trevor Roberts, and many people believed in it and went to West Texas to find the living pit. The scale and details of this project are incredible. The artist created brochures issued on behalf of scientists, secret organizations, geologists, and travel companies. He described the pit in detail, made beautiful models in Photoshop, wrote about the internal structure of the hole, and even now continues to keep a fake chronicle of events. It all started in the 70s. Miners were drilling a well searching for oil and found a strange layer of soil. Scientists, geologists, constructors, and secret organizations arrived at the site. They began large-scale excavations and discovered an unknown living organism. Biologists determined that its biological structure is similar to that of mammalians. It had layers of skin, the epidermis, dermis, and hypodermis. There are many dangers inside this tunnel. You can get lost if you take the wrong turn. This is not just one colossal passage. Many branches and other sections are leading into the unknown. Another danger is spasms. The organism's walls contract and shrink unpredictably. It's like how your muscles tense up when someone tickles you. There are also little weird creatures living on the walls of the pit that you can meet inside. You have to wear a protective suit to go down there. The walls of the hole can pull moisture out of you even if you don't touch them. The big pit needs to drink and eat, and it needs a lot. Until now, scientists haven't managed to determine the exact size of the pit and how deep underground it stretches. As far as we know, it may be growing and moving towards Earth's core right now. If it gets to the very center, it can cause worldwide destruction. But since the discovery and further study, people have expanded the tunnel inside the pit using technologies developed by Anodyne Deep Earth Mining Company. They built staples that artificially expanded the walls of the body. And all of it mostly to turn the pit into a tourist attraction. And in the 80s, this place became one of America's national parks. Anodyne Deep Earth Mining Company built a tunnel 1 mile long to send tourists there. But many who went there didn't manage to return. There are many mazes inside the pit where you can easily get lost. When the company expanded the tunnel and reinforced the walls with frames and brackets, the pit emitted a long moan, clearly audible for miles away. It felt pain and didn't like what people had been doing to it. The exact age of this superorganism is also unknown, but scientists found shells of ancient sea creatures inside. This suggests that the pit was once underwater. There was an ocean in this place about 146 million years ago. Also, scientists say this is not one organism, but a giant colony of many smaller creatures. Millions of unknown living beings adapted to life inside this monster. Perhaps once upon a time, the pit was a separate organism. Then, over millions of years, other creatures have attached themselves to its insides. These creatures, similar to crustaceans and beetles, have developed protection against the gastric juice of the superorganism. But the pit feeds not only on what it gets inside its stomach, it absorbs Earth's resources, oil and water. When nearing the mysterious pit, people noticed that they began to experience a strange feeling of love. They felt happy and wanted to always stay nearby. This is probably why corporations couldn't conduct more thorough experiments on this organism. They just didn't want to hurt it. This attraction worked thanks to the pheromones the pit released into the air. People from all over the world came to the pit to enjoy that love that the monster makes them feel. They organized festivals and shows there, and even wrote songs about it. But despite this, some began to use this pit for selfish purposes. Companies discovered that the meat of this creature was a cheap and valuable raw material for other industries. They realized they could earn a lot on this. The creature began to be exploited. Many were afraid that it would wake up and destroy everything around, but the organism continued to remain in the ground. People drilled new tunnels, extracted material, and made excursions, and so it continued until 2007. On that day, there was a network overload. The power transmission system inside the pit and all the drilling rigs started to send out electric currents. The giant pit began to spasm. At that moment, tourists had an excursion there. The passages began to narrow, and people got stuck there. The rescue operation started. The plan was simple. Scientists decided to throw some toxins into the pit. This was supposed to force the pit to spit people back out. They dumped the substance inside, and it worked. The pit threw out pieces of clothing and some creatures living inside it, but there were no people. Along with that, the pit released a cloud of vapor with an unpleasant smell that spread out for 50 miles. The place became toxic. All people were evacuated. Hotels closed. All construction work stopped. This U.S. national park became a forbidden place, and only people with a high admission level could enter it. Later, the pit became the object of study for secret organizations and scientists. They managed to find out that this creature had 5 limbs attached to the central body. Which of those are its arms, legs, and head remains unknown. After releasing the toxins, the pit fell asleep again. Sometimes it moves and makes low sounds coming from its depths, reacting to people's research. You can find gigabytes of information about it on Reddit. Trevor Roberts creates brochures, reports, and diagrams about the pit's internal tunnels. Other Reddit users have joined this work. He tries to release materials on the pit twice a month. Also, he plans to create a big album with illustrations and detailed information about his project. Fans expand the world of the Mystery Pit. You can find their promotional brochures from hotels located near the pit, diagrams of meat tunnels, and even a detailed description of the protective suit in which you can go on an excursion. Many see this project as a philosophical demonstration of the relationship between people and nature. Someone loves to read the details of the pit's internal structure. You can also become a part of this project and come up with something new. Prints on t-shirts and mugs with the image of a pit, for example, or some biological feature, whatever. While people are working on it, the pit continues to breathe, shrink, expand, and make mysterious sounds. The Mystery Mitt Pit is a massive colony of small living organisms, and all these creatures are people.
Space. Dark, lifeless, and quiet, right? Well, apparently it's not always true. Recently, scientists have detected an eerie echo coming from the main black hole in our galaxy. It has high and low notes and sounds pretty otherworldly. What does it mean? Should we sound the alarm bell, siren, whatever? Sagittarius A star is our own supermassive black hole, sitting right in the center of the Milky Way galaxy where we live. You might know that black holes are the true monsters of our universe, gobbling up everything that is careless enough to come too close. If a massive black star runs out of its star fuel, it sometimes becomes super dense and buckles under its own weight, collapsing inward and bringing space-time along. As a result, the gravitational field of this new thing becomes so strong that nothing can escape it, not even light. And so goes a black hole. We really can't see black holes since they devour everything, even light. But we can still figure out where they're located, all thanks to the existence of accretion disks. Want an explanation? Well, picture a black hole. The starving thing consumes all the matter that strays too close, squeezing it into a superheated disk of glowing gas. The black hole also bends light around it, which creates a circular shadow. That's what I mean. We can't see a black hole itself, but we can see the accretion disk surrounding it. It happens like this. First, the material gets caught in the black hole's orbit and squeezed into a razor-thin spinning band. Friction, heat, electric, and magnetic forces energize this disk, which makes the material glow intensely. The most massive black holes have such bright bands that they can outshine millions of galaxies. Inside this disk of glowing material, particles rub against one another. It slows them down and sends them straight toward the black hole's event horizon. If this friction didn't exist, the material would be orbiting the black hole for billions of years, like planets circling around their stars. Now, let's get back to Sagittarius A star. It's far less luminous than other black holes at the center of galaxies astronomers have observed. It means that, at the moment, our central black hole isn't actively munching on the matter surrounding it. What, is it catching some Z's? The answer is unclear. There's new evidence received by NASA's IXP telescope. It suggests that the seemingly sleeping giant woke up pretty recently, about 200 years ago. Ooh, that is recent. It snacked on gas and all kinds of cosmic debris within its reach. Why did it happen? And what did the black hole do after that? Sagittarius A star is the nearest to a supermassive black hole, just 25,000 light-years away from Earth. Its estimated mass is millions of times greater than that of our Sun. It sounds impressive, doesn't it? So, when scientists spotted relatively recent X-ray emissions of ginormous clouds of gas in the vicinity of the black hole, they immediately called on the IXP telescope to figure out what it may mean. What intrigued them most was how bright these clouds were. You see, most cosmic clouds, called molecular clouds, are dark and cold, with their X-ray signatures very faint. But that wasn't the case with this finding. Of course, there are a few theories concerning this phenomenon. One of the main explanations for why these giant molecular clouds are shining so bright is that they just echo a long-gone flash of X-ray light. It could mean that our supermassive black hole might not have been that dormant some centuries ago. After additional research, astronomers figured out that the X-rays coming from the giant molecular clouds were actually reflected light. And this light must have come from a short-lived and extremely intense flare that was produced either very near or right at Sagittarius A star. And the most likely cause of it is the black hole suddenly consuming a huge chunk of the material surrounding it. It happened around the start of the 19th century. It was most likely a sight to behold. Whirlpools of particles were drawn toward the black hole's event horizon, also known as the point of no return. The black hole started to ingest all this material, which resulted in brilliant bursts of X-ray light and echoes that we managed to translate into sound waves here on Earth. This discovery is crucial for understanding the processes happening to and around our supermassive black hole. We might also figure out what physical processes can potentially awake Sagittarius A star again, even if this period of activity is just temporary. Supermassive black holes are the largest among all black holes out there. Their mass can be hundreds of thousands or even millions to billions of times the mass of our Sun. And two such giants have been recently spotted with the help of the Atacama Large Millimeter Submillimeter Array of Telescopes, mercifully also known as ALMA. Two gigantic black holes were growing alongside each other not far from the center of the coalescing galaxy. Apparently, these black holes came across each other when their host galaxies collided. One of the black holes is around 200 million times the mass of our Sun, and the other is a bit smaller, about 125 million times the mass of our star. They aren't visible directly, but are surrounded by bright clusters of warm glowing gas and stars tucked close by the black hole's gravitational pull. Time will pass, and these black holes will start circling each other, and eventually they will collide, creating one, probably even bigger, black hole. Interestingly, such immense merges are more typical for distant galaxies. This makes it harder for Earth-based telescopes to see them. But the sensitivity of ALMA helped astronomers observe these bright and compact regions where matter swirls around black holes. Imagine how surprised they were when, instead of one black hole, they saw two of them, munching on the dust and gas stirred up by the massive space merger. And if before, experts thought that such galaxy mergers didn't really happen in our neighborhood, this discovery may mean that black hole binaries like this one may be much more common than we previously thought. And if pairs of black holes are so common, it can make it easier for us to study gravitational waves. These waves, also known as ripples in space-time, occur when black holes collide. If we talk about the recently discovered pair of black holes, it might still take them several 100 million years to crash into each other. But by observing their behavior, scientists can figure out how many binary black holes that are about to collide there are in the universe. Also, this may give us more insight into what is going to happen when our home Milky Way galaxy collides with the Andromeda galaxy in about 4.5 billion years. Oh, I can't wait. Now, have you heard that we might be living in a black hole? I'm not kidding. Such a scary theory does exist. See for yourself, black holes pull inside everything they see. But what if one black hole has already engulfed us long ago? Surprisingly, some physicists deem this theory somewhat plausible. For example, Dr. Nikodem Poplovsky, a theoretical physicist from Indiana University, states that everything that a black hole swallows may turn into a new universe inside the hole or on the other side of it. Who knows? Maybe our universe used to be a quite different place until it got pulled into a black hole. The theory of white holes is closely connected with the previous idea. While black holes swallow all the matter so that not even light can escape, white holes are something quite the opposite. These formations are believed to spit out everything that black holes have pulled in. In other words, a white hole is the hypothetical area of space-time that nothing can enter from the outside, but light and matter can escape from it. As for a black hole, on the contrary, you can only enter it from the outside, but can't get free afterward. Black holes are some of the most enigmatic and sinister phenomenon in the universe. They can swallow up entire stars and planets, bending the very fabric of space and time. But what if Earth, our home planet, were to be caught in the grip of a black hole's event horizon? What would we see before the inevitable end? Well, let's have a look-see, okie dokie. So a black hole is like the bully on the playground. You avoid them at all costs. It's a region of space where gravity is so strong that nothing, not even light, can escape it. It's like Houdini in reverse. As with snowflakes, every black hole is unique. Each one has its own mass, spin, and charge. And they also come in different sizes, sort of like jeans. Petite, slim, regular, and husky, or something. Anyway, there are 4 sizes. The smallest black holes are the stellar mass kind. They're born when the massive star runs out of juice and folds in on itself. They're like the chihuahuas of the black hole world. They may be tiny, but they're feisty. They gobble up nearby matter like a hungry puppy. And even the smallest one is 3 times more massive than our Sun. Next up, we have the middle children of this cosmic family, intermediate mass black holes. They're too big to be born out of collapsed stars. Scientists believe that they may be created when several black holes merge into one. And even though they can't dominate galaxies, at least they can swallow up some nearby stars. Goody for them, huh? But do you know who can dominate a galaxy? The enormous monsters of our universe, supermassive black holes. They're the giants with masses ranging from millions to billions of times that of our Sun. And they play a crucial role in the growth and formation of their host galaxies. Finally, there are ultra-massive black holes. Trust me, you can't even imagine the size and mass of these guys. These cosmic eldritch horrors are extremely rare, but the ones we know can devour entire galaxies like Pac-Man. So, what happens if you get too close to a black hole? Or more like, what would you see in your last moments? Well, first, you reach an event horizon. It's like a point of no return, an invisible boundary that marks the edge of a black hole. And here's where things start to get really weird. For example, time starts to slow down. Not for you, for an outsider watching you from a safe distance. If you were falling into a black hole, you wouldn't feel any different. But if you were watching someone else fall into it, you'd see them slow down and eventually freeze in time, like in a paused video. As you get even closer, you would start to see some pretty mind-bending things. The gravity would cause the light around you to bend and distort, creating a sort of funhouse mirror effect. You might even see a halo of light around the black hole, known as the photon ring, or jets of high-energy particles spewing out from the black hole's poles. You can actually get pretty close to a black hole without feeling any major effects. It's only when you cross the event horizon that there's no going back. Your goose is cooked. After crossing this boundary, you'd be unable to see anything. For the person watching you from the outside, it would be as if you had suddenly disappeared. Meanwhile, you might start feeling a bit stretched out, like a piece of spaghetti. This is because the gravity is so stark that it's pulling you in different directions at once. There's even a scientific term for it, called spaghettification. We'll cover linguinification in another video. Now that you're inside a black hole, you're taking aim at the singularity. It's a point of infinite density in its center, where all matter is crushed down to a single point. It's like trying to fit an elephant into a tiny matchbox. Everything gets squished together until it's as small as it can possibly be. Which means it's time to wave goodbye, I guess. And if all that sounds scary, here's another fun fact. Black holes are not rare at all. Actually, there's one in the center of each galaxy, including our own Milky Way. So, does it mean that we'll eventually be sucked into it? And if so, how exactly would it happen? Well, let's see. Imagine a black hole approaching our solar system. At first, it appears as nothing more than a tiny speck in the distance. But as it gets closer and closer, its gravitational pull begins to wreak havoc around. Planets start to veer off course, asteroids are flung into oblivion, and comets are shattered into a million pieces. But just like waiting for the sausage to be served in a German restaurant, the worst is yet to come. Yeah, like that joke. Soon, it inevitably reaches the Earth. First, our planet's atmosphere would be pulled toward the black hole, triggering a massive windstorm. And there'd be huge waves on the oceans, the water itself being distorted by gravitational forces. Imagine seeing seas and oceans getting stretched out. Earth's magnetic field is generated by the motion of molten iron in the planet's core. But now, the extreme tidal forces of the black hole would disrupt this motion, causing the magnetic field to weaken and distort. All this would cause massive earthquakes and volcanic eruptions as the planet's crust and mantle were pulled apart. All infrastructure and technology would be completely destroyed. Buildings, bridges, and roads would be torn apart. Okay, let's hit the pause button. Pretty horrifying, isn't it? Nah, but don't worry. You wouldn't have even seen that much, because you would have felt the effects of the black hole much, much earlier. Well, back to the future. We'll lose our magnetic field even before everything started to collapse. And this means not only that the weather and climate will become terrible, we'll also be exposed to extreme radiation. These gamma rays and the heat from the black hole could drastically change our planet. Say ta-ta to all our beautiful nature. At least misery loves company. We won't be the only ones affected by a black hole, which is probably even worse. As this beast engulfed the entire solar system, it would consume about everything. One immediate effect would be the disruption of the orbits of asteroids, comets, and all the other bodies. The planets would begin to deform and stretch, their surfaces warping like molten metal. The sun itself would be affected, its surface contorting like a glob of putty. And yeah, all this is scary even to imagine. But now, breathe and relax, because none of this will ever happen. This is the bright side, remember? Your infinitesimal odds of winning the big lottery are even better than the Earth ever being swept into a black hole. The nearest black hole to our solar system is called Gaia BH1. Discovered by scientists in 2022, it's found in our own Milky Way galaxy, about 1,600 light-years away from Earth. Gaia BH1 is about 10 times the mass of our Sun, which makes it a stellar mass black hole. It's not very interesting on its own, but its discovery has supplied valuable insights into the behavior of these cosmic monsters. But as you can see, even the closest known black hole is over 1,000 light-years away. They move very slowly, and they'll never get so close to our system to pose some kind of a threat. Hey, but didn't you say there's a black hole in the center of the Milky Way galaxy? Doesn't that mean it's going to eventually hoover up our entire galaxy, you may ask? Maybe not in that voice. Well, don't worry. The correct answer is no. The one in the center of our galaxy is called Sagittarius A star. You may remember it from that viral blurry photo that circled around the internet a few years ago. This black hole is indeed very massive and has a strong gravitational pull, like two 8th graders in love. However, it's still a small beam. It only affects objects that are close to it. The objects in the galaxy are all too big and move too fast to be pulled in by black holes. Nevertheless, they're still fascinating objects to study. Scientists are still trying to unlock the mysteries of black holes. And even though they'll never be dangerous to us, they're still a huge reminder of the incredible power of our universe. Now I think I'll turn my attention to the incredible power of chocolate.
If you ever fly over the deserts of southern Peru, you'll notice distinct white lines against the rusty red background. Look closer, and you'll see some clear shapes. Straight lines, rectangles, triangles, swirls. It seems like they're parts of huge drawings. You notice a monkey, a whale, a condor, a hummingbird, and whatnot. The lines were created more than 2,000 years ago by the people of the Nazca culture. Thanks to a dry climate and strong winds in the desert, most of the Nazca lines are visible today. To create them, the Nazca people removed the top layer of pebbles and revealed the soil beneath the ground. The color of the soil changes from reddish-brown to yellowish-gray, so the lines always look different. It looks like the creators of the lines started with small-scale models and increased the proportions to create full-scale designs. Scientists have tried to decipher the meaning of the Nazca lines ever since they were first discovered in the 1920s. But the first mention of the lines was actually much earlier, in the 16th century Chronicle of Peru, where they were described as trail markers in the desert. Since you can't really study the lines and their symbolism from the ground, the lines became world famous only in the 1930s with the advent of commercial planes. A decade later, American professor Paul Kosak was doing his research on the lines and noticed one interesting thing. When he looked up from the line, it was pointing directly at the setting sun. It happened one day after the winter solstice, and the scientists concluded that the lines must be the largest astronomy book in the world. German scientist Maria Reiche, who got the nickname the Lady of the Lines, supported the theory that the geoglyphs served as a calendar and had some sort of astronomical purposes. She dedicated 40 years of her life to studying the lines and swept them inch by inch. She also moved into a small house close to the lines to protect them from unwanted visitors. Then in the 1970s, American researchers called the astronomy-related theory into question. They noted that in a region like Nazca, one of the driest places on Earth with only around 20 minutes of rain per year, water is a real treasure, and the straight lines and trapezoids must have had something to do with it. They could be pointing at locations for rituals that the local people organized to obtain water and make crops more fertile. The images of animals in the Andes region are also related to water. Spiders are thought to be a sign of rain. Hummingbirds stand for fertility, and monkeys living in the Amazon symbolize an abundance of water. In more recent years, the Nazca lines have become the research ground for archaeologists from Yamagata University. They're using high-resolution aerial photography and drones to discover and catalog geoglyphs. The team has identified a total of 358 geoglyphs so far, and 168 out of them in 2022 alone. They found images of humans, camelids, birds, orca whales, cats, and snakes, most likely created between 100 BCE and 300 CE. Some of the images are around 10 to 20 feet long, so it's no wonder no one was able to detect them before. The largest geoglyphs, by comparison, are 1,200 feet across, which is about the height of the Empire State Building. The researchers believe the Nazca lines were used as a form of communication in the desert. The linear ones pointed the direction from valley to valley. The ones drawn on slopes seem to have been drawn along ancient pathways between settlements. The scientists now plan to find patterns in the geoglyphs depending on their distribution. They use artificial intelligence to analyze the images. The AI generates designs that are likely to be painted in the desert, and the team then checks if they're actually among the Nazca lines. Another famous Peruvian geoglyph is a candelabra, slightly taller than the Washington Monument. You can find it on a seaside hill in the Paracas Peninsula. Researchers managed to establish the approximate age of the candelabra by analyzing the nearby artifacts. It looks like it dates back to around 200 BCE. The drawing is etched deep into the sand, and it was never meant to look like a candelabra. One theory says that the drawing was supposed to resemble the trident of an Incan deity to please it. Another popular theory is that sailors used it as a beacon for navigation. Effigy Mounds National Monument on the Mississippi River has 195 known Native American mounds. Most of them are conical in shape, and there are also several that look like birds, deer, turtles, bears, and panthers. Scientists have established that the mounds date back to around 450 BCE, and the images are somewhat younger. A study of the mounds found some copper, bone, and stone tools. The builders' descendants say that the mounds served as ceremonial sites. This story is passed down from generation to generation. Some historians believe the mounds could have been also used to mark celestial events or territories. The American Southwest and the nearby regions of Mexico have over 300 intaglios, which are giant images engraved in the ground. The most famous of them are the Blythe intaglios in California, west of the Colorado River. Blythe giants are a group of 6 figures, including that of a human being and an animal. Scientists believe the images are somewhere between 450 and 2,000 years old. According to the local Mojave tribe, there is an image of Mustamho, the creator of life. The animal figure shows a mountain lion who served as his helper. The largest figure is almost as tall as the Leaning Tower of Pisa. The creators of the intaglios had to scrape the dark rock of the desert until the lighter soil showed up. It's nearly impossible to notice them from ground level. That's why they were only discovered in the 1930s, when a pilot flying over them accidentally looked down. The best way to see the giants is still from a helicopter. Kazakhstan can boast its own Nazca lines, a cluster of around 260 earthworks in the north of the country. The steppe geoglyphs are a variety of geometric shapes, including squares, crosses, circles, and a 3-pronged design. The creators of the images used materials such as dirt, rocks, and lumber to build them out of the ground. A local economist first spotted the geoglyphs while browsing Google Earth in 2007. Archaeologists suppose that the structures go back 8,000 years, but they still don't know who built them or why. One theory says that the lines helped track the sun's movement. NASA got interested in the discovery since the lines are much older than the ones in Peru. They took photos of the steppe geoglyphs from space, trying to solve their mystery. Another fact that makes the lines so special is how huge they are. One of the largest of them has sides as long as an aircraft carrier. The only humans who could have built them must have been the nomadic Stone Age tribes, but it's unlikely that they had such advanced tools. If they did, that would mean that archaeologists need to rethink the abilities of our long-ago ancestors. Organizing such a huge amount of people to work together on a complicated project is an amazing feat. Although the white horse on a lush green hill in Oxfordshire, England, could easily pass for modern art, it's actually one of the most ancient geoglyphs. It was created between the Bronze and Iron Ages and is the oldest chalk-cut hill figure in Britain. Whoever created it had to remove the turf to reveal the chalky white part of the soil. Scientists can only guess why this piece of art was created. It could have been a fertility symbol or a way to mark territory. Aerial images prove that the horse has changed over time because of the soil. It took several centuries to reveal a larger horse-like shape that lies under what we see now. There's a heavy snowstorm. The cold penetrates his bones. His legs are almost knee-deep in snow. Experienced hunter Joe LaBelle makes his way through the forest, covering his face from the headwind. Any other person would have already fallen and screamed in despair, but not Joe LaBelle. He can survive in any circumstances and always knows what to do. Right now, he's heading to one of the villages in the far north of Canada. This small settlement is located on Lake Anjikuni. The inhabitants of this village are Inuit, indigenous people of North America. Joe hasn't eaten or drunk for a long time. He needs a good sleep and a hot meal, which he hopes to get from the hospitable Inuits. Through trees and a white haze, he notices the silhouettes of tents. Smoke is coming from some houses. Joe will probably get there in time for lunch. He reaches the village, and at this moment, the wind calms down. The blizzard has ended. The hunter speeds up and goes toward the village, located along the frozen lake. It's strange, but there are no locals anywhere. Probably everyone is just sitting in their houses, waiting out the blizzard. "Hello!" Joe says loudly, but gets no response. Oh, great! Smoke is coming out of this tent. Joe knocks on the wall, but no one opens it. He knocks a few more times and goes inside. The little tent is empty. All things are in their places. There's a piece of cloth with needles and thread on the table. Firewood is smoldering in the fireplace. It seems that people have just left this place. Joe goes into the next tent and sees the same picture. All things are in their places, but there are no people. Joe walks past the tents and sees a pit where a bonfire once burned. There's a rope above it with the meat that the Inuit were cooking hanging on it. For some reason, they didn't eat it. Lake Anjikuni is part of a chain of waterways. Here, the Inuits fished and traded various goods. Usually, there are many people here, but now something has forced them to leave their homes. Why did they leave their things behind? And where did they go? There are no tracks around the village. All the sleds are in place. The Inuits have even left their dogs here, and dogs help them to hunt and ride sleighs. No one will leave warm clothes and dogs here when moving away, especially in severe weather. Joe LaBelle knows all this, so he concludes that something terrible has happened here. His body is shaking, not from the cold, but from fear. After going around the entire settlement, he finds not a single soul. Terrified, he leaves the village, heads for the nearest telegraph pole, and sends a message to the police. After a while, more and more people arrive. The police are trying to find traces of missing people and figure out what has happened, but there's nothing. Near the village, they find an empty grave. During the ceremony, the Inuits placed stones around the burial site. The rocks around the open pit lie untouched, which means it wasn't an animal that dug it up, but who or what needed it? About 30 people lived in the village, and they're all gone. Local residents from neighboring villages can't help, since they have no idea what has happened. The only thing that the police have noticed is unusual blue lights. In this area, the northern lights are a common phenomenon. People living here regularly see a glow in the starry sky. But the police have seen something else, pulsing blue lights. Also, other hunters have witnessed something similar. They say that some strange things were flying in the sky. This all happened in 1930. It's been almost 90 years since the disappearance of the village, and people have created a bunch of theories. The most popular of them is an attack of an extraterrestrial civilization. According to this theory, the blue lights in the sky that the locals and the police saw were spaceships. Some believe that one ominous night, these ships flew to the settlement and took away all the people. In addition to these sci-fi versions, there were also more realistic ones. Internet users have found out that Joe LaBelle didn't have a hunting license. Maybe he wasn't a professional and made it all up. But at that time, many hunters didn't have a license, so Joe's words may be true. But if we try to find out where all this information came from, we'll see that the primary sources were books and some newspaper articles from the 30s. But none of them can confirm that the mysterious story of Lake Anjakuni is true. Perhaps this entire story was made up. Now let's leave the snows of Canada and head for the hot plains of India. In this big country, there's one sinister village where people also disappeared without a trace. This happened in the first half of the 19th century. Still, locals avoid this place even now because they believe that invisible evil forces live there. Let's check and find out what happened to the village of Kuldara. It's located in the district of Rajasthan. To get there, you can use a taxi to get to the nearest village or city. The village is located far from other settlements. It looks deserted. There are only ruins. It looks like archaeologists have recently dug this place out of the ground and left it here. But this is not an ancient city. The village was abandoned more than 200 years ago. But up to that point, this place had been thriving. Kuldara was a large village. Local people were mostly farmers. They sold their agricultural products. And then, one night, everything changed. People abandoned their homes and stuff and ran away from there. No one knows why they did it, and no one knows where they went. Nobody has ever seen the inhabitants of Kuldara again. Apart from tourists, almost no one comes here. The locals are sure that the village is cursed and is the center of paranormal activity. If you ask residents of other nearby towns or read the information on the internet, you'll learn a couple of legends about this place. One popular version says that people left this village because of a lack of water. However, this version doesn't explain why the residents did it overnight and left their things behind. According to another version, the villagers ran away to save the daughter of the Kuldara chief. One local ruler fell in love with her and wanted to marry her. He threatened the locals with grave consequences if the girl rejected him. The ruler gave them 1 day to make a decision. The residents disagreed with such a requirement. As a sign of solidarity, they decided to leave the village together with the chief and his daughter. But if this is true, why did no one else see these people? They must have escaped to another settlement. In addition, they needed their things on the way there. The stories of Kuldara and Lake Anjakuni have one thing in common. People left a comfortable and safe place for an unknown reason. A similar story happened in Ireland with a small village on the island of Achill. About 40 simple houses made of stone and straw were located along the valley of Keem Bay. The village was mentioned in documents dated back to the 1830s as a group of small buildings. But today, there's practically nothing left of it, except pieces of walls and small mounds of ground. People from other settlements don't remember this village, but we know about it thanks to the records of travel writers. They describe the incredible beauty of this place and the village in their diaries. Students of the local archaeological school tried to find the answers. They started excavations and discovered that the villagers could have left the village because of hunger or...
All right, so let's start our journey with one of the most famous and scary vanished villages. It's located in India, the district of Rajasthan. This is Kuldara Village. Unlike other abandoned places, this one is difficult to get to because the locals won't want to take you there. People are afraid of this place and try to avoid it. You can't get a taxi and drop off near this spot. The driver will tell you where to go. You won't find any traces of civilization nearby. The village is located in a hot desert area, but when you get close to it, you'll feel an unpleasant chill down your back. You won't find any vegetation because of the heat. There are only ruins of buildings and sand-covered roads. It seems as if you're walking through the excavations of an ancient city. But Kuldara is not so old. It only vanished in 1825. Before this time, the village had been thriving. It was almost a town consisting of many small settlements united into communities. Residents were busy with agriculture there. Plus, they went mining and extracted valuable gypsum rocks and minerals. But suddenly, everything changed overnight. For some unknown reason, people abandoned their homes and ran away. No one knows why, and no one has ever seen the residents again. Locals living in the nearest areas are sure that this place is cursed, so they never come close to it. They think this is the center of power from the other world. Some people feel sick here, others claim to see phantoms, and still others experience irrational fear. But tourists like to go there. The simplest and least scary vision says that people left the village because of the lack of water. Still, this version seems weird. If there had been a lack of water, people would have planned the change of location instead of running away in a hurry. The second version is way more mystical. There's a legend that one cruel ruler collected large taxes from this community. He fell in love with the daughter of the Kuldara chief and threatened that he would collect higher taxes if the girl refused to marry him. He gave her 1 day to make a decision. None of the residents agreed with such a requirement. As a sign of solidarity, they decided to leave the village. Those who don't believe in all these rumors can spend a night in a tent there. Chances are you'll hear someone screaming or feel someone walking and knocking on your tent. Nah, just kidding. Our next village is in the U.S., in the state of Pennsylvania. More precisely, it's not even a village, but a borough called Centralia. This place looks totally lifeless. Burnt trees, dried grass, empty buildings. Almost all the roads here have huge cracks. People sprinkle them with gravel to decrease the amount of thick smoke that's pouring from the ground all the time. This abandoned place has been burning for more than 50 years. No wonder this place reminds of something. The authors of the horror game Silent Hill got inspiration from this town. Centralia was a mining town with shops, cafes, libraries, and happy residents. People worked in the mines to get anthracite coal. They used one of the underground tunnels as a landfill for garbage. And then, in 1962, according to the popular version, they decided to get rid of garbage by burning it. The plan failed. As soon as the garbage caught fire, it spread throughout the mine. Then, all mining work in the town stopped because of the increased level of carbon dioxide. Residents didn't manage to extinguish the fire, and it started to spread underground throughout the whole city. Roads began to heat up. The soil became poisonous. Thick smoke slowly filled the streets. People were evacuated from this place. By 1992, Centralia was completely abandoned. The town looks ominous, and some people believe it's not just because of the fire. They believe not all people managed to evacuate, and their phantoms are still walking through the burning streets, waiting for someone to finally put an end to this eternal fire. Just imagine a prosperous, beautiful village where people do agriculture on fertile land and bake delicious bread. And then, bang! Everything disappears. There were only traces on the ground and a couple of bricks left from beautiful stone houses, mills, and chapels. Huge fertile fields became abandoned, and no one knows why. Well, welcome to the English village of Gainsthorpe in Lincolnshire, or rather what's left of it. From above, you'll see earthen ramparts on the grassy field, the outlines of roads, sunken hollows, and barely distinguishable contours of the walls of houses and barns. If you come here, you may not even notice the traces of the village. It's just an unusual green field. But in the 17th century, life was thriving here. Let's try to solve this mystery. The first mention of this place dates back to 1086. I wasn't around then. Since that time, it was prospering. There were about 19 fertile fields, a chapel, a mill, a bridge, and a manor house where the lords lived. In total, there were about 25 buildings. From the records dating to the 16th century, you can find that quarries appeared in the village. That is, this place not only got wealthy, but also kept pace with progress. Then, by 1616, the village had become completely abandoned. Scientists are still looking for an answer to this question. Some believe that something terrible and mystical happened to the village. One of the main hypotheses explaining what happened is the plague. Another version is that Gainsthorpe still couldn't catch up with progress. In the 17th century, there was a transition from rural to urban life. Industrialization had begun. Many young people left their native villages to search for a better life. Some believe that groups of robbers and thieves settled in the village. They turned Gainsthorpe into their base and eventually plundered it all. The exact reason is still unknown, but the good news is that, theoretically, the village can be returned. Specialists can reconstruct the ruins and recreate agriculture. The hardest part, though, is to find funding. A similar fate befell the small village of Achill Island in Ireland. About 40 simple houses made of clay and straw were located along the valley washed by Keem Bay. And it was just a fantastic place to live. Coast, mountains, crystal clear water, and rich soil. The village was founded in 1838. Now, there are several mounds of ground and small pieces of walls left of it. Locals living in neighboring settlements don't remember this village. Or maybe they know something, but don't want to say anything to anybody. Only travel writers described it in their diaries as a place of serene beauty. Now, many towns nearby still exist, but why did this one disappear? An inexplicable phenomenon that sweeps entire villages off the face of the earth? An unknown, mystical, scary force? If there is nothing fantastic about this village's disappearance, then why don't people build any new houses here? Perhaps they're afraid of something. So, the local archaeological school students decided to find the answer to this question. They started excavating the village in search of clues. They found out that some kind of trouble happened to this place in the middle of the 19th century, but it's not known exactly what. At that time, a terrible period of famine came. Perhaps people simply left their homeland to find food elsewhere. Anyway, work on excavation continues, and the students intend to uncover the truth. In the 20th century, more and more villages became abandoned all over the world. The main reason is the relocation of residents. Young people don't want to live away from the modern world, but older adults can't leave their native place, so they stay there as the last residents, and then, several years later, when they have bought the farm, so to speak, villages get abandoned. Another problem is access to medicine. In some places, people have to drive tens and hundreds of miles to the nearest doctor. But many villages are still thriving. Some towns receive more funding and have developed agricultural businesses. Besides, not everyone likes city life. Often city administrations specifically distribute free land to people in rural areas so that they can build houses there.
The SCP Foundation is a secret organization that has one goal: to secure, contain, and protect the world from bizarre creatures and objects. The secret bases of this organization are hidden all over the world, and each of them contains scary, dangerous, harmless, miraculous, and simply crazy objects. And now, you'll see some of the weirdest. Object SCP-410. This is a colony of 14 individual beetles, similar to Scarabaeus of different colors, from light blue to dark emerald. At first glance, they look like ordinary insects, but soon you notice that these bugs don't feed on leaves, larvae, and other food. They eat mistakes in a text.
What?
Put a paper with some text containing spelling or grammar mistakes and syntactic errors inside the terrarium with object SCP-410. The bugs run up to misspelled words or punctuation errors and eat them. 20 minutes later, the beetles secrete corrected letters or words from their bodies. This way, they completely edit the text. One member of SCP-410 can eat about 25,000 errors per day. The beetles can live without incorrect texts for about 2 days. Then they fall into a state of hibernation. To revive them, you need to put a text containing at least 50 errors next to them. Object SCP-2157 is a mysterious 200 square foot piece of land found in a forest in Japan. People are standing in different poses on this territory. 20 men and 21 women. They're all of different weights and heights. Their feet are on the ground, and their faces are turned to the west. People react to external stimuli. They blink, flinch, and get scared. And still, they're standing there, motionless like trees. They start screaming if somebody tries to lift them off the ground. But soil analysis has shown that SCP-2157 objects have no physical connection to the land. Their feet are in no way connected to the soil. A body scan has shown some earth inside their stomach. As soon as an SCP Foundation employee enters their territory, the people turn their heads in their direction and just stare at them. As soon as the outsider leaves, the people start looking to the west again. Monitoring of this object continues. Object SCP-621. It's hypnotic tulips. They look like ordinary tulips, but have bioluminescence. They get energy and other nutrients from the water and glow purple, blue, or green. This glow has a hypnotic effect on people and all nearby living beings. Bees, for example, start pollinating only these flowers, ignoring all other plants, which speeds up the reproduction of the tulips. Herbivores and other natural enemies avoid SCP-621. All this makes tulips a rapidly spreading species. While growing, SCP-621 takes all the nutrients from other plants growing nearby. It depletes the soil and consumes a lot of water. Under the influence of SCP-621, a person tends to take care of the plants and do everything to make them live as long as possible. For example, owners of large fields only take care of the tulips and ignore the rest of their farmlands under the influence of the glow.
Oh God! Oh God!
Thus, tulips can spread until they capture all territories, and people will treat them with love because of their hypnotic effect. Therefore, it's crucial to keep tulips in an isolated greenhouse. Employees of the SCP Foundation water them every day and don't allow them to get out of the area. Object SCP-2559-J. While conducting research in one of the laboratories, a scientist accidentally opened a portal to another dimension. Little kittens began to come out of this portal in an endless stream. There's an infinitely huge world of kittens on the other side. If you pick up one of them, it will turn out to be an ordinary little kitty. The portal is located deep underground. It's not yet known how to close it. As a person approaches the doorway, they find themselves under the influence of cute kittens. Now, they're falling out into our reality at a rate of 3 kittens per second. SCP-999 is a large moving mass of transparent orange slime. It looks like jelly and has the viscosity of peanut butter. The shape and size of the creature are constantly changing. The object's surface is covered with a thin, flexible membrane that prevents the mass from spreading in different directions. It's a friendly creature that likes to play with people.
So cute.
It jumps on a person, hugs them, and makes gurgling sounds. SCP-999 emits a pleasant and constantly changing odor. It can be the smell of bacon, or fresh bedding, or roses. Touching SCP-999 causes euphoria that increases with the duration of contact. After that, a person experiences happiness for a long time. The object likes to completely envelop people and tickle them from head to heels. Object SCP-831 is a colony of unknown insects, similar in appearance and properties to ordinary termites. They feed on cellulose and water with sucrose. One termite lives from 25 to 40 days. The colony should remain in an empty, bright room under constant supervision. The walls and floor in the room should be made of high-strength steel. Employees should pour water with nutrients on the floor to maintain the life of these termites. You can only enter the room in a protective suit. When the termites get access to any object, they begin to use it to make the most primitive tools. For example, if you put a pencil in a room, termites will extract graphite and use the wooden body to create chips or something else. If you constantly feed it, the colony will grow and multiply. It will use primitive tools to create modern technologies. These termites know the properties of all substances and understand how to use them to create inventions. With the help of knowledge of the laws of physics and chemistry, and using wood and graphite from the pencil, in a few days, termites can create a primitive steam engine. The longer they stay in some place, and the more they multiply, the more perfect the inventions will be.
Oh, yeah.
A colony of millions of termites can create high-tech machines or radio transmitters that are incomprehensible to people. The boundaries of inventions are unknown, but the results of their work surpass all human technologies. This is why SCP Foundation employees keep SCP-831 in an enclosed, empty room. Object SCP-1689. It's a big bag of potatoes. In stable condition, it weighs about 110 pounds. There are about 200 tubers of ordinary potatoes inside. The inner space of the bag is much larger than it looks from the outside. The size of this area is unknown, but it's completely filled with potatoes. It's impossible to determine where the bag ends.
Oh my god.
SCP Foundation employees once went on an expedition inside the bag. Scientists created a special paste that broke down starch and turned potatoes into liquid slush. This way, the employees made a tunnel for themselves by spraying the substance and raking potato muck with shovels. That's when they found out that the space had a concrete floor, concrete walls, and a ceiling. They were walking inside some kind of building filled with potatoes. The team punched a hole in the wall and left the construction. The ground was covered with dried grass. There were only potatoes around. What was at the top was unknown, since the entire space was filled with potatoes. They also found a rusty bicycle there. The expedition failed. SCP-1689 leads to a world similar to ours, but something happened there, and it began to fill up with potatoes. Object SCP-623. This is a small room built in the 60s by a professor of biochemistry. There are only these items in the room: one blue sofa, one red sofa, one green sofa, one white plastic chair, one round table decorated in the same colors as the sofas, 7 chairs around the round table, and 7 multicolored lighting fixtures. All the furniture is nailed to the floor. Strange patterns are painted on the walls. They perfectly match the style and the location of the furniture. The acoustics and the appearance of the room, as well as the arrangements of all the objects, have a strong, pleasant effect on a person.
Oh yes.
Inside the room, people feel harmony and happiness. They relax and become kind and harmless. Because of the feeling of peace and serenity, people can't take the furniture out of the room. They just want to dance, laugh, hug the table, lie on the floor, and cry with joy. But as soon as they leave the room, they immediately become angry, aggressive, and sad. The real world outside the room seems to be a dangerous and dark place. If you stay inside the object for more than a few minutes and then go out, you can lose your mind.
This may sound mind-boggling, but scientists found a 385-million-year-old root network. Yeah, it's like a fossilized web of roots that's got them all excited. They're reimagining what the world's first forest might have looked like, and let me tell you, it's not what you'd expect. Under an old highway department quarry near Cairo, New York, they found the remains of a mighty and mature old-growth forest. This place was home to at least 3 of the world's earliest tree-like plants, but these plants, in fact, looked nothing like trees. One of them looked like giant stalks of celery. The second type resembled pine trees with hairy fern-like fronds for leaves. And the third plant was like a palm tree with a bulbous base and fern-like branches. It's like they couldn't decide what they wanted to be when they grew up. But here's the kicker. These primordial trees were quite old and large, so they weren't packed densely together. They were relatively scattered across a floodplain that ebbed and flowed with the seasons. And even though dry periods were a regular part of the cycle, these tree-like plants thrived in semi-arid conditions. Their roots had adapted to the possibility of short-term flooding, which is confusing because they're not supposed to survive in those conditions. But wait, it gets even weirder. Other trees in the area came more prepared for bouts of water scarcity. There were extinct pine tree-like plants with deeper root systems that could spread 36 feet wide and 23 feet deep. These guys were more advanced than the fern-like trees and had true leaves that could photosynthesize. It's like they were showing off or something. So why did the fern-like trees dominate prehistoric deltas, while the pine-like trees dominated the floodplains? It's like they didn't even care about setting up near rivers or water sources that could carry their genes farther afield. Maybe they were just rebels without a cause, doing their own thing and not caring what anyone else thought. In any case, this finding has got evolutionary ecologists all excited. They're saying that the earliest trees could colonize a range of environments and weren't limited to wet areas. Who knew trees were so versatile?
Question for you. Do you think Atlantis could be real? It remains as one of history's greatest mysteries. The legend began with Plato, all the way back in ancient Greece. The tale of a civilization that formed and prospered before our own. Atlantis was supposedly a highly technological society, much like the Mayans. But, as the legend says, due to the people's greed, they were punished by a flood that destroyed and submerged their cities. Different theories try to guess Atlantis' location. Some say it was in the Mediterranean Sea. Some say it's beneath the Bermuda Triangle. But, as science has shown us, Atlantis may be only an allegory for humankind. Today, you'll discover several amazing underwater cities that you have never heard of. They existed indeed and are not just a myth. We're taking you on an excursion to the underwater city of Baia, which is on the coast of Italy. Known as the Las Vegas of the Roman Empire, Baia was a resort city. The Roman elite traveled there for recreation. Imagine an open-air spa. That was Baia. You can visit the submerged town by scuba diving and get close to that perfectly preserved, magnificent Roman sculpture, a true underwater wonder. You can spot the crumbled temples and buildings through glass-bottom boats. This is a moss-covered museum in Claudio's Nymphaeum. To your left, you can see a collection of classical Greek statues. Swimming down the Via Herculeana, you'll arrive at Villa Aprotio. Villas are Italian-style houses, and here you can admire their original marble floors. Notice the black and white patterns and the astounding shapes they make. Next, you'll arrive at Portus Julius. Can you see the collapsing wall structures at the bottom of the seafloor? You'll see well-preserved columns and limestone floors. Behold the ruins of the thermal baths of Lacus. The remaining multicolored mosaics are something great to see. You'll see their orange, blue, and green tiles if you get close enough. At Pisoni's Villa Pila, you'll see 25 preserved Roman pillars. Notice the arches, the frescoes nearby, and the magnitude of this well-kept treasure. The city was located over natural volcanic vents, so there were hot springs to be used at will. People went there looking to have an excellent time. And when I say people, I mean some of the great Roman emperors we learn about in school. Nero, Cicero, Caesar. But around the 8th century, the city was sacked and the luxurious town was abandoned. Slowly, the water level rose and the city started to drown. You are on a summer vacation off the coast of Greece, 4 hours outside of Athens, in the Peloponnese Peninsula on Pavlo Petri. You dust off your snorkel and head for a free dive on a bright sunny day. Sometime into the dive, you start noticing patterns on the seabed. 13 feet below the surface, the outline of familiar objects starts to appear, one by one. As you continue swimming, what looks like the outline of an entire city emerges before your eyes. You wonder, how could water have taken the whole city? Rocks are perfectly aligned into what appears to be the foundation of a building. Nicholas Fleming, a British oceanographer on vacation in Greece, was the person that discovered Pavlo Petri. He was documenting the seafloor artifacts. The team found the site filled with pots, storage vessels, and tools. A quern stone, for instance, is a tool used for grinding grains and turning them into flour. Multiple amphoras, which were found then, indicate that this settlement dated back to the Bronze Age, 5,500 years ago, when people started living in towns. The settlement is believed to have lasted for over 2,400 years. Pavlo Petri is considered today the oldest submerged town yet found, and it's impressive that it wasn't a simple village. It was a vibrant port city with stone-built buildings, a marketplace, streets, and even squares. Let's continue our exploration and find secrets in other underwater cities. You are diving off the coast of the Ryukyu Islands. Pacific waters are far from smooth. There's a strong current pulling you into the deep sea. Suddenly, you see a huge structure thanks to the sunlight shining down on the seabed. At first, it looks like Machu Picchu's ruins across the globe in Peru. As you approach it, you slowly figure out its form. A pyramid-shaped structure, arches, staircases. It's something that could have easily been a palace or castle. Could this also be a sign of human activity? What you just saw is known today as the Yonaguni Monument. It also goes by the name of Japan's Atlantis. The entire monument is about the size of 5 football fields and the height of a 5-story building. Its most surprising feature is its expansive terraces that host large crowd gatherings. Explorers and scientists believe that Yonaguni dates back to 10,000 years ago. But whether it is a man-made structure or a natural formation is still under debate. For Japan's top marine geologist, Professor Masaki Kimura, Yonaguni is the heritage of a lost civilization. Kimura has dived into exploring the ruins over 100 times over the past 10 years. According to him, there are clear signs of human activity down there. The Triangle Pool, located on the monument's surface, is a triangle-shaped concave that is a historical symbol of water fountains in the region. There is also a giant turtle carved on the eastern side of the structure. And according to Kimura, turtles have an important cultural meaning. Several pieces of stone tools have been recovered from the site. Their estimated age dates back to 10,000 years ago. However, not all scientists are convinced of the same. For many, Yonaguni is the result of thousands of years of erosion. The fact that the monument is composed of one massive rock leads them to believe that it is not human-made. The defined edges and flat surfaces resemble a natural formation occurrence in Northern Ireland, known as Giant's Causeway. A series of interlocking basalt columns look like the ruins of a palace, but they were the result of volcanic activity in the region. Well, stay tuned for more underwater discoveries. The next stop on our voyage is one of today's most famous underwater cities that has turned into an underwater archaeological park. The city of Port Royal in Jamaica exists today only below the surface. But in 1692, it was one of the wealthiest cities in the Western Hemisphere. Port Royal was the center of the British Empire at the time, and an important trade city that attracted people from all over. It was also home to real-life pirates of the Caribbean. On the morning of June 7, 1692, the people of Port Royal met a different fate than they probably expected. The bars and restaurants beaming with life woke up shaking. People were taken out of bed with the power of a massive earthquake, estimated today at 7.5 on the Richter scale. One survivor says he saw the earth opening up and swallowing the town whole. What he said could be true, as the city was mainly built over sand. The ground sucked buildings, roads, and everyone above. Geysers erupted, and finally, waves as big as 10-story-high buildings hit the city. About 33 acres of the city disappeared underwater, and amazingly, most of its 17th century remains lie in good condition under 40 feet of water. In the ruins, archaeologists have found taverns, storage rooms, kitchens, and recreational buildings used for diverse purposes. You can see a grand lion statue, a submerged bridge, and many picturesque arches. Now, do you fancy a trip to India? Just outside its coast lies another sunken marvel. A site known as the Lost City of Cambay is located on the Gulf of a similar name. It remained hidden until 2001, when the National Institute of Ocean Technology did a routine water assessment. With sonar technology, which sends a wave of sound to the bottom of the sea, they found something far beneath the surface. Images showed well-defined geometric shapes spread along a 5-mile stretch. The remains found dated to more than 9,500 years ago, meaning that this civilization was lost at around the end of the Ice Age. Debris recovered from the site included construction material, pottery, beads, sculptures, and even bones. Scientists argue whether these artifacts are indeed from the site, but if they truly are, then the Lost City of Cambay would be the oldest civilization in the world.
You've probably heard about the mysterious sea state of Atlantis. It was a high-tech utopia where people lived happily, but then something happened, and Atlantis disappeared from the face of the earth. Many people believe that this city lies at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. But what if we've been looking in the wrong place all this time? What if it's somewhere different from where they're trying to find it? What if all this time Atlantis was in the middle of the Sahara Desert? Well, this unexpected theory has some evidence, but to study this version, you first need to understand what Atlantis was and how we got to know about it. The very first mention of the mysterious city was in 360 BCE. Ancient philosopher Plato wrote about Atlantis. His work, Dialogues, described Atlantis as a rich land with advanced technologies. Its inhabitants were powerful, intelligent, and beautiful, like superhumans. He described in detail the structure of the city, and this was the main reason why many people believed in the existence of Atlantis. According to his records, the Atlanteans built this place in several concentric circles of black and red stone. Then they covered these circles with brass, tin, and precious metals. In the city, there were water channels on which ships sailed. The Atlanteans were sailors, so they built a passage from their city to the open sea. On the internet, you can find many drawings of Atlantis, created based on Plato's descriptions. Take a look at these drawings and an actual photo of the Eye of the Sahara. This place in the Sahara has a shape of several concentric circles. It looks as if a destroyed city left a trace on the sand. Many people have written online that the lost city was located there, but no one could prove it. Once upon a time, the Sahara was filled with rivers and lakes. In prehistoric times, there was only water there. So far, everything matches. The Eye of the Sahara was first discovered in the 1930s. This place was considered a crater from a fallen meteorite. But in the middle of the 20th century, scientists conducted a soil analysis and refuted the version with a fallen space rock. In the end, everyone agreed that this was a dome of molten rocks under which magma was raging. For millions of years, wind and water had been destroying the formed landscape and eventually made it look like perfect circles. But what if the Atlanteans once came to this place and used natural circles to build a city? In this case, we would have many traces and artifacts from this developed civilization. And yes, archaeologists did find some arrowheads, spears, oars, and other things there. But this has nothing to do with Atlantis. In the Eye of the Sahara, a multitude of Acheulean artifacts lies. It was an ancient tribe that frequented this place. For the first time, Acheulean tools appeared more than 1.5 million years ago. Some of the items found there may be 130,000 years old, and according to the records, Atlantis existed about 12,000 years ago. Archaeologists found no artificial structures in this place. There was also no debris or traces of a large city. People would have found some stuff if a big city with advanced technologies had existed here. The main supporter of this idea was one YouTube channel. It collected 1 million views and attracted the attention of many historians and anthropologists. The theory that the Eye of the Sahara is Atlantis was quickly refuted. People found too many discrepancies between this place and the description of Atlantis. The author tried to catch the viewer's attention by presenting external similarities between the natural landscape and the fictional ancient city. Another popular theory claims that Atlantis was a real continent located off the Bahamas, but then this city was swallowed up by the Bermuda Triangle. According to this legend, the city ruins still lie at the bottom of the triangle, but there's no confirmation of this theory either. Writer Charles Berlitz invented it. Adherents of this theory claim that the walls and streets in the western part of the Bahamas might be the ruins of Atlantis. But scientists disagree. They have proven that these walls are natural formations of coastal rocks. There are also rumors that the story of Atlantis was inspired by an actual historical catastrophe, the Black Sea Flood. This is the Bosporus, a strait in Turkey connecting the Black Sea and the Sea of Marmara. Around 5600 BCE, the Black Sea was twice as small as it is now and had many cities on its shores. Unfortunately, a huge flood destroyed this flourishing civilization. Within a year, cities descended underwater, and surviving inhabitants moved to foreign lands and spread stories about the flood. Maybe these stories inspired Plato to come up with Atlantis. In the 1950s, people came up with another version. Atlantis was the continent that is now Antarctica. Tens of thousands of years ago, a warm continent with a developed city shifted to the northern part of our planet because of the movement of Earth's crust. The Atlanteans couldn't adapt to the cold conditions, and Atlantis was covered with a thick layer of ice. This theory was refuted when scientists began studying the tectonic plate's nature. It turned out that Earth's crust couldn't have moved such a huge continent as Antarctica. The tectonic plates don't behave this way at all. But the main question is, was Atlantis real? No one had described it before Plato. Perhaps the philosopher came up with it. Maybe he did this to emphasize the correctness of his views on life and to identify his philosophical theories. In his works, he wrote a lot about divine and human nature and how people can destroy this nature. He spoke of decaying ideal societies because of immoral behavior and vices. The Atlanteans were once moral, spiritual people who created a utopia, but then they became greedy and mean. They destroyed their inner nature, and for this, they had to witness the destruction of their city. One night, fires and earthquakes hit Atlantis and plunged the city into the sea. The higher powers punished people for their immoral behavior, and Plato also wanted everyone to be afraid of moral decay. But judging by the descriptions of the earthquakes and fire, it may seem that Atlantis was destroyed by a volcanic eruption, as it was with the ancient Roman city of Pompeii. And such destructions have happened pretty often throughout history. Natural disasters ruined many developed cities. One of the most famous cases occurred in 1100 BCE in the Mediterranean Sea, when a volcanic eruption destroyed the highly developed Minoan society. The Minoan society existed for about 2,000 years. These people mostly lived on the islands of Crete and Santorini, located north of Crete. The Minoans had beautiful houses, a sewage system, and a developed economy. They were engaged in agriculture, grew fruits and vegetables, painted frescoes, and made jewelry. They were the first people to found the thalassocracy, an empire based on the sea. They lived off of fishing, piracy, and maritime trade. At the time, they performed cruel rituals, and their way of life was far from moral. They were used to earthquakes on the island of Santorini, so they reinforced the walls of the city with wooden beams, but they didn't know what a volcanic eruption was. And when the sulfur smell appeared in the air, they didn't suspect the impending catastrophe. When the volcano spilled out tons of lava and ash, all the residents of Santorini abandoned their homes and tried to escape, but they couldn't. The eruption and earthquake triggered a tsunami. A large wave flooded the coastal part of the island of Crete. This hit the economy of the Minoans hard and destroyed their port harbor. Then, foreigners attacked Crete and finally destroyed the developed civilization. Some historians think that Plato could have referred to the Minoan Empire when describing Atlantis. Using their example, he showed how immoral actions could destroy people.
So, imagine you're 15 and you get bored of playing video games. Instead, to pass the time, you decide to give some attention to an old hobby of yours, tracking down lost Mayan cities. You've heard that some ancient civilizations are said to have built entire cities based on constellations, so you decide to check out whether that was true for the Mayans. You find a book containing all the constellations the Mayan civilization believed to exist. You open good old Google Maps and map every ancient Mayan city discovered to date. You start seeing that this information actually matches. And truly, the biggest ancient Mayan cities correspond to the brightest and biggest stars of the Mayan constellations. Okay, this is getting interesting. You manage to map out over 100 ancient cities when you suddenly notice something strange. There's an area in the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico where archaeologists have unearthed 2 Mayan cities. But on the constellation map, there are 3 stars. Could this mean there is a long-lost city waiting to be discovered nearby? You might think this sounds too daydreaming, but the story is actually true. The previous account happened to a Canadian teenager named William Gaddery. The boy is known as a science genius and had even won an award for the constellation theory we presented just now. When he noticed that a 3rd city was missing from the 23rd constellation he was examining, he began to scour the internet for satellite pictures that could help him solve this mystery. He looked into images from NASA, JAXA, a Japan-based satellite company, and Google Earth. These images were still insufficient to answer his questions, so he reached out to a friend inside the Canadian Space Agency. His friend provided him with state-of-the-art satellite imagery that gave him the answer he was looking for. According to the images, there is a large square area right on the border of Mexico and Belize, which looks like the remains of a city. William took the images to a remote sensing expert known as Dr. Armand Laroque from the University of New Brunswick. They studied the images thoroughly and concluded that the area could be housing 30 buildings and even a large pyramid. The scientific and archaeological community went crazy with the 15-year-old's discovery. Could this really be true? Some background. Lost Mayan cities began to be unearthed in the mid-20th century. Since then, ruins from cities such as Tikal, Palenque, and Uxmal have been rediscovered. The Mayans were one of the biggest pre-Columbian civilizations living in the Americas. They began to settle in the area as early as 1500 BCE. Experts believe that, at its height, the Mayan civilization consisted of over 40 cities with a population of millions of people. That's a crowd. And their cities were pretty interesting. Their civilization spanned over Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, Guatemala, and Belize. They survived mainly on agriculture, so they developed a complex irrigation system in most of their cities. They built a series of ceremonial buildings, pyramids, plazas, and even courts for ball games. The Mayans were keen pyramid builders, but they also developed an advanced astronomical system. With whatever ancient technology they had, they were able to predict the exact location of planets, such as Venus and Mars, and they were able to predict the exact dates of eclipses. That's why the methodology William used to discover this long-lost Mayan city was unusual, but not completely surreal. The Mayans were keen astronomers, so it wouldn't be too strange that they built their major architectural feats in relation to the sky, would it? And they wouldn't be the first ones to be doing so. There is a famous fringe of Egyptology dedicated to studying how the Giza pyramids were built in perfect alignment with the Orion constellation, meaning that each pyramid was purposely built to align with one of the major stars of Orion's belt. According to William, he first had the idea to look at the Mayan constellations because he couldn't understand why the Mayans built their cities where they built them. Most major cities, such as Chichen Itza and Uxmal, aren't near any rivers or significant bodies of water. Instead, they're built on marginal lands and on top of mountains, which confused the 15-year-old. His next thought was that it might have something to do with astronomy. William named the new city he discovered Mouth of Fire, which is also my nickname, and he even won a merit award for his hard work. However, his theory was very much contested inside the archaeological community. and many Mayan experts work to debunk Williams' findings. Some archaeologists say that constellation theories are too unscientific. Anthony Aveni, a renowned anthropologist and astronomer, referred to Williams' methodology as an act of creative imagination. He explained that there is no way to be sure what the Mayan constellations really were. It's all just hypothetical. Another debunking of Williams' findings came from Mayanist David Stewart, who said that the object identified on the satellite imagery is nothing but an old cornfield. His claim was supported by an expedition that took place near the area in 2021, when the archaeologists present reported there was nothing at all in this area. Still, a 15-year-old boy almost found a long-lost Mayan city, which is pretty exciting if you ask me. Similar techniques as those used by William are actually being used to unearth lost civilizations all over the world. According to space archaeologist Sarah Parquet, satellite imagery has been a key player in discovering ancient cities in Egypt and other places. Sarah herself spends most of her days scouring images for any sign of where there could have been cities long ago. What happens, she says, is that any time you have something buried, it's going to be covered either by vegetation, soil or sand, or some other modern construction on top of it. In order to assess whether there is something hidden under large canopies of vegetation or not, she uses infrared technology, for instance. A major recent discovery in Brazil was done in a similar way. Satellite imagery detected a network of trenches dating back to 200 to 1200 CE. These suggest settlements that could have supported around 60,000 people. But in this case, the satellite imagery did indeed correspond to what was on the ground. Researchers from the University of Florida found several mounds that were accompanied by ditches and geoglyphs. Archaeologists also found remnants of carefully designed walls, centered around plazas, much like the type of construction done by the ancient Mayans. Advances in satellite tech have also shed new light on long-discovered ancient Mayan cities, such as Tikal. Located in the heart of the Guatemalan jungle, Tikal is believed to have been the capital of the ancient Mayan Empire. At its height, it was comparable in importance to cities such as London or New York in today's world. It was composed of a series of complex monuments, many of them believed to have been the resting places of kings and chiefs. Tikal is already known to have been big, but recent discoveries show it could have been even 3 times larger than what scientists originally believed. The main discovery revolves around a fortification on the outskirts of the city, indicating how far the original city stretched. And new discoveries still take place. In 2017, researchers also unearthed new clues regarding the potential causes of the decline of the Mayan civilization. Using data from a site in Cebu, located 62 miles southwest of Tikal, scientists analyzed radiocarbon data from ceramics and archaeological excavations to extract new information about the sudden demise of this great civilization. The information shows that, instead of a sudden collapse, the Mayans most likely collapsed in waves of social instability and political crises. These events are believed to have deteriorated Mayan city centers and began causing the dispersion of the Mayan population. Well, it seems like it's a prime time to uncover ancient ruins. What do you say? Will you give it a try as well?
Imagine discovering an ancient city without leaving the comfort of your home. In 1963, a man in the Nevşehir province of Turkey did exactly that. He was renovating his house. He knocked down a wall in his basement and found a mysterious room. He continued digging and saw a tunnel. This is how Derinkuyu Underground City was found. Derinkuyu is one of the deepest multi-level underground settlements of Cappadocia and in all of Turkey. This engineering masterpiece has 8 levels. The inhabitants living on those floors had access to cellars, storage areas, chapels, a school, a study room, and other structures. All floors are connected by an extensive network of tunnels. It's believed that the underground city was built as a shelter. You can't see the construction from the outside. Its depth is approximately 279 feet. The complex was large enough to shelter about 20,000 people, plus their livestock and food supplies. There's also a 180-foot ventilation shaft. People used it both for ventilation and as a well. The well supplied water both to the villagers living on the surface and to those hiding in the underground city. Interestingly, those living on the bottom levels were able to cut off the water supply for the upper and ground levels. This kept the water safe from potential poisoning. The place was designed for protection. The tunnels could be blocked from the inside with huge round rolling stone doors. The passageways were extremely narrow. Potential invaders had to enter the tunnels one at a time. Seems like they thought of everything in the 7th century BCE. Archaeologists believed the Phrygians were the ones who first built the levels. After them, the structure was used and enhanced in Roman times. This was when the chapels were added. The golden time of Derinkuyu, however, was during the Byzantine era. But how did these people manage to create such tunnels? Well, the rock they carved them into wasn't usual. It was soft volcanic rock. It appeared due to a geological process that began millions of years ago. Volcanic eruptions covered the area in thick ash. It then solidified into this soft rock. When the natural forces of wind and water eroded softer parts, only hard elements remained. Fun fact, fairy chimneys are also made of intricately shaped volcanic soft rock, but they formed naturally without any human intervention. I'm still in Turkey, but this time, my destination is Çanakkale, where a myth came to life. For 3,000 years, people believed that Homer's Iliad was fiction and that Troy never existed. In 1863, everything changed. Expatriate Frank Calvert discovered ancient ruins in western Turkey. He was convinced they belonged to the ancient city of Troy. Heinrich Schliemann examined this area in 1868. That's when Troy saw sunlight again after all those centuries. Troy has complex layers. Over the years, 9 ancient cities were built on top of one another. Historians say that the area was strategically located between Europe and Asia, so it became a prosperous trade and cultural center. This strategic position made Troy attractive throughout history. After the Trojan conflict, the city was abandoned between the years 1100 to 700 BCE. Then Greek settlers rediscovered the area, and Alexander the Great ruled there. The Romans then invaded the city. Speaking of this event, the first thing you would see when visiting the site is a replica of the wooden Trojan horse from a movie shot in 2004. The next stop is Lothal. In the 1950s, Lothal and several other Harappan sites were discovered in India. These new provinces extended the boundaries of the Indus Valley civilization. Lothal was an important part of the Harappan civilization. It had vast cotton and rice fields. Plus, it had a bead-making factory. Beads were made from semi-precious stones, like agate. Many of these beads were later found in Mesopotamia, which serves as evidence that Lothal was a thriving trading port. Archaeologists believe that the city was part of an ancient trade route. Traces of agriculture? Check. Traces of trade? Check. What else? The remains of residential buildings, streets, bathing pavements, and drains. Some real city planning, and impressive examples of early urbanization. The town was well constructed. There were modern houses. Some of them had 6 rooms, bathrooms, a large courtyard, and even a veranda. Lothal also had the world's oldest known dock. It linked the city with the Sabarmati River and the trade route. The ancient Mayan city of Calakmul is located in southern Mexico in the tropical forest of the Tierras Bajas. From 500 CE to 800 CE, Calakmul was home to over 50,000 people. There was a central plaza surrounded by outer districts. And if we count both the inhabitants of all those outer areas and those who lived in the center, Calakmul had a population of more than 1.5 million people. It was a city that was habitable for 12 centuries. It's believed that the place had more constructions than any other excavated Maya settlements in the region. After 1000 CE, the Maya civilization there faced a downfall. The settlement that was once the center of Mesoamerica was almost completely abandoned. The ancient city was at the heart of the second largest tropical forest in America. The site is well preserved, so today, if you were to visit it, you would be able to picture what life looked like in ancient Mayan times. The city remains include architectural complexes and sculpted monuments, defensive systems, quarries, water management features, agricultural terraces, massive temple pyramids, and palaces, not to mention a variety of body ornaments and other accompanying objects. It proves that complex, state-organized societies lived in this tropical forest. The Mayans depicted nature in their paintings, pottery, sculptures, rituals, and even food. I'm moving on to a place people thought didn't really exist. The city of Thonis Heracleion appeared only in a few inscriptions and ancient texts. Turns out, it was waiting to be discovered for thousands of years. Scientists searched the majority of the coast of Egypt. But then, archaeologist Frank Gaudio and his team detected a colossal face looking at them from under the water. The ancient city of Heracleion was discovered completely submerged 4 miles off Alexandria's coast. In the ruins of the lost city, there were 64 ships, 700 anchors, and a treasure trove of gold coins. Archaeologists consider a 16-foot-tall statue and the temple remains the most important findings discovered by the expedition. Back then, the city had ceremonies and celebrations that took place in the Temple of Amun. The ruins and artifacts were made from granite and diorite, so they were in good condition even after having been in contact with water for centuries. They give people a glimpse into what life was like 2,300 years ago in one of the most important trade ports of the world. The city had a network of canals. You can think of it as an ancient Egyptian Venice. The canals linked many separate harbors and anchorages. Towers, temples, houses, and other structures were also linked by bridges. Thonis Heracleion was the country's main port for international trade and the collection of taxes. No one really knows how the city ended up submerged, but archaeologists connect it with natural causes. At the end of the 2nd century BCE, most probably after a flood, Heracleion got covered with water. Then, Alexandria, the city founded by Alexander the Great, became more glorious than Heracleion. Before Alexandria's fame, Heracleion was the main port of entry to Egypt. So, after the disaster, many ships heading for Heracleion had to change their route and go to Alexandria. Heracleion lost its glory until its rediscovery in 1933. Mesa Verde is an American national park in Colorado. The park is the largest archaeological preserve in the U.S., with more than 5,000 sites, including 600 cliff dwellings. Mesa Verde means green table in Spanish. The name comes from the shape of the mountains in the area, with flat tops and steep sides. The park is an ancestral Puebloan archaeological site. Starting from 7500 BCE, a group of nomadic Paleo-Indians seasonally lived in Mesa Verde. They were hunters, gatherers, and crop farmers. They built the first pueblos in the region. By the end of the 12th century, the Mesa Verdeans began constructing massive cliff dwellings, which are now the best-known structures in the park.
In November 1922, a boy walked through the desert mountains of Egypt and discovered some ancient steps carved into the rock. Subsequently, this find became one of the world's largest and most significant archaeological discoveries. This step was part of Tutankhamun's untouched tomb. Archaeologists found about 5,000 ancient objects, including jewelry, fabrics, painted vases, and funeral masks. You've probably seen one of them. It has become one of the most recognizable attributes of ancient Egypt. More than 100 years have passed since then, and now humanity has finally become close to another large-scale discovery, the tomb of Cleopatra. This queen was the last active ruler of the Ptolemaic Kingdom of Egypt, who sat on the throne from 51 to 30 BCE. There are many ancient records about Cleopatra, her reign, and her unusual personality, but until now, no one has discovered the secrets about her passing away in the burial place. So, one archaeologist, Dr. Kathleen Martinez, has been studying ancient records and temples around Alexandria for decades and concluded that the tomb of the queen should be located under the ancient city of Taposiris Magna, founded in 280 BCE. It was a big city on the northern coast of Egypt where tens of thousands of people were engaged in trade and industry, and it seems that Dr. Martinez's guesses turned out to be correct. She and a group of archaeologists have discovered a secret underground tunnel near Alexandria with a length of about 0.8 miles. It was cut into the rock under Taposiris Magna's temple. During further excavations, they found many things that indicate Cleopatra's tomb lies in the tunnel's depths. It's also possible that she is buried there together with the Roman commander, Mark Antony. According to ancient records, Cleopatra and Mark Antony loved each other and together opposed the Roman Senate, which declared Antony a traitor. The fact that natural disasters have occurred on the territory of Taposiris Magna for thousands of years can complicate the excavations. Earthquakes and floods destroyed the city and possibly flooded its underground tunnels. But archaeologists hope the ancient tomb remains untouched, and that it hides many treasures and records about the royal life of ancient Egypt during the reign of the last dynasty. There's a chance that excavations will go underwater and in the mud. This will require much time and funding, but archaeologists are sure it's worth it. Anyway, it's too early to say that Cleopatra is really buried there, but scientists have found many things in the tunnel that confirm this, including clay pots, dozens of coins with the image of Cleopatra and Alexander the Great, as well as a bust with the image of the Egyptian queen. Cleopatra is still one of the most popular personalities in Egypt, on an equal footing with Ramesses III and Tutankhamun. She inspired many films, paintings, and books, but what made her so popular? She became famous for her inconsistency. She was a beautiful, intelligent ruler who pulled Egypt out of the crisis and made it a prosperous power. Medieval Arabic texts say she knew chemistry, mathematics, and philosophy, and may have written several scientific books. She knew several languages and had excellent diplomatic skills. At the same time, there are many legends that she was a femme fatale who drove many men crazy. However, there's no evidence that her beauty was incomparable. The image of a stunning model was created by Hollywood when it made several films where famous actresses performed the role of Cleopatra. And the Roman Emperor Octavian, the adopted son of Julius Caesar, specially created the image of Cleopatra as an insidious seductress because he was her enemy. Even though she was born in Egypt, Cleopatra wasn't an Egyptian. Her ancestors were Greeks, among whom was one of the generals of Alexander the Great. However, the people of Egypt loved her. She learned the language and was very sensitive to the traditions of this country. She knew the history, mentality, and customs of ancient Egypt well. She raised the level of its economy and strengthened its status as a world power. Much of this was made possible thanks to her cunning and impressiveness. She loved theatrical performances and lavish celebrations. She knew how to surprise people and put on a show. But behind the exterior image of a luxury lover was an intelligent and calculating ruler. Ancient Egypt was a rich, luxurious country, and Cleopatra did everything to increase its wealth and strengthen its position in the international arena. For example, she was once in conflict with her brother Ptolemy XIII. The queen knew that she wouldn't be able to resist him, so she decided to attract Julius Caesar to their side. The Roman emperor arrived in Alexandria, where Cleopatra wanted to meet him, but Ptolemy knew about her plans and was about to prevent her from coming to Caesar. Then, instead of a rich and noisy arrival, Cleopatra decided to make her visit inconspicuous. She wrapped herself in a carpet or linen bag the emperor's servants carried into Caesar's private chambers. Cleopatra emerged from the carpet and impressed the Roman emperor with her beauty and determination. As a result, they fell in love with each other and became close allies. After some time, she impressed another influential Roman for diplomatic purposes. She arrived to meet Mark Antony on a golden barge with purple sails and silver oars. Cleopatra was dressed in the image of Aphrodite and sat under a magnificent canopy. Her servants dressed like cupids and were blowing her fan and burning incense. But Cleopatra created such a show for a reason. She knew that Antony revered Greek mythology and considered himself the embodiment of Dionysus. As a result, he was so impressed with this woman that he ended up marrying her. Cleopatra defended her crown, strengthened her alliance with Rome, and bore Antony 3 children. In Egypt, they threw big parties and enjoyed wealth with power. However, the relationship of a high-ranking official with the Egyptian queen caused a scandal in Rome. Octavian was Antony's primary opponent in the struggle for power, so he exploited the situation to darken the competitor's reputation. He used propaganda to make Cleopatra an insidious seductress in the eyes of Roman citizens. He accused Antony of succumbing to her charms. The Roman Senate supported Octavian and declared Cleopatra an enemy. In 33 BCE, this conflict reached a high point when Antony's navy clashed with Octavian's fleet. The latter won and forced his enemy to flee to Egypt with Cleopatra. According to some records, they took refuge near Alexandria. Pursued by the Romans, they hid in one of Cleopatra's palaces and met their end. Some legends say that Cleopatra was an expert in poisons. She provoked a venomous snake, a viper or an Egyptian cobra, to bite her. Also, according to another legend, she pricked herself with a poisonous needle. There's a theory that Cleopatra always carried an ampule with poison inside her hairbrush. And when she was cornered, she soaked the needle with this poison and pricked herself. None of this can be said for sure. Scientists are still trying to find out the truth. Perhaps when they reach Cleopatra's tomb, the world will get more answers about her tragic fate. She is considered the last ruler of Egypt. After her passing, Octavian plundered her palaces and temples and returned to Rome, where he became the main emperor. He successfully ruled the country and expanded its borders. His reign ended when he turned 75. World history would have looked different if Cleopatra and Mark Antony hadn't lost that naval battle. By the way, did you know that more time has passed between Cleopatra's reign and Neil Armstrong's flight to the moon than between the reign of the Egyptian queen and the construction of the Great Pyramid of Giza? Armstrong took a step on the Earth satellite in 1969, 38 years after the birth of Cleopatra. And the construction of the pyramid took place in 2560 BCE. Imagine how long the history of ancient Egypt is. Cleopatra is closer to us in time than to the pyramids.
You're flying above Earth on the International Space Station at an altitude of 250 miles. You cast a glance out the porthole, and your eyes widen in surprise. There's some kind of bright blue flash just above nighttime Europe. It's like there was an explosion of some strange substance there. Such a strange luminous event was spotted by a French astronaut from aboard the ISS. And it wasn't an explosion at all. It was lightning, and was directed upwards. Until recently, this phenomenon was a kind of fairy tale among pilots. Scientists had heard their stories about lightning striking upward, and about red and blue flashes at high altitudes too. But there was no definitive proof of the existence of these luminous events. But they do exist, and are called sprites, elves, trolls, and ghosts. So how does ordinary lightning work? Masses of moist air in a cloud rub against each other and create static electricity. It would be almost the same if you danced in a wool sweater. It becomes charged with static electricity. And if you touch a metal doorknob, there's a discharge between your fingers and the door. There's your lightning. So a thundercloud builds up a strong negative charge. Sooner or later, a leader is born in the cloud. It's a bright thermo-ionized channel, or more simply, lightning. The leader moves toward the ground in steps of a few tens of feet, and it can accelerate to an average speed of 200,000 miles per hour. At that speed, you could make a trip around the Earth in just 7 minutes. But negative particles attract positive particles, and particles with opposite charges will tend to connect and compensate for each other. So, simultaneously with the negatively charged leader, the positive charge from the Earth begins its upward journey. The electric charge from the Earth connects with the negatively charged leader in one channel. This is when the brightest and loudest discharge happens. We call it lightning. It's this discharge that you hear as thunder. The main lightning doesn't strike from top to bottom, but from bottom to top. Yep, that is, the lightning is actually directed upward. It's as if the Earth is striking back at the thundercloud. And that charge can reach up to 30,000 amps. Your average wall outlet only has about 15 amps. And the record for the length of lightning is about 440 miles. That's more than the width of the state of Kansas. Meteorologists recorded such lightning in Brazil. It was a discharge between giant thunderclouds. And the longest lightning strike was recorded in Argentina. A single lightning strike there lasted 16.3 seconds. By comparison, you blink at 0.1 seconds. So we saw a regular lightning strike. The positive particles from the ground neutralize the negative particles in the cloud. But the cloud is still full of positively charged particles. They accumulate and wait for their time to create lightning. Once the charge reaches a critical point, the lightning cloud throws that charge dozens of miles upward. This is called a blue jet. It's exactly the same luminous event seen by a French astronaut aboard the International Space Station. The blue jets look like someone turned on a gas burner pointing upward. The positively charged blue jets neutralize at high altitudes with negatively charged particles, but people on the ground cannot observe blue jets. Thunderclouds obstruct the view, but they can be seen from an airplane. That's why, for a long time, commercial airline pilots were the only witnesses to this phenomenon. On board the ISS is also a great place to observe jets, as they are born at the very top of thick clouds and shoot dozens of miles upwards. But if you climb even higher, you can see this kind of bizarre lightning. It's a sprite. It looks more like a jellyfish. A cloud of red charge at the top and a bunch of little tentacles coming down. Now, normal lightning can have a temperature of about 54,000 degrees Fahrenheit, but you can touch a sprite with your hands. Unless, of course, you're afraid of a powerful electrical discharge. The sprite has about the same temperature as an energy-saving light bulb. All because sprites are born in the mesosphere. This is the layer of our atmosphere that starts at about 31 miles high. And it's the coldest place on our planet. On the ground level, where we live, the air is much denser. There are just more air molecules. They absorb heat from the sun's rays, and we feel comfortable. But the higher up we go, the fewer air molecules there are. At the altitude at which commercial airline planes fly, there's no longer enough air to accumulate that heat. You wouldn't even be able to breathe up there. That's why every airplane has oxygen masks for emergencies. And the temperature here is even colder than at the South Pole. In the mesosphere, there's almost no air, and the temperature here can be around negative 202 degrees Fahrenheit. And although the temperature of the lightning itself is high, in general, it's like if you poured a glass of boiling water into a huge barrel of cold water. The temperature won't change much. Sprites can only appear when paired with thunderclouds below. As a discharge occurs in a cloud, a sprite appears in the mesosphere. It tries to equalize the amount of charge in the atmosphere. So it's like these red flashes of lightning are trying to reach down to the thunderstorm. And a sprite itself can be as wide as the state of Massachusetts. And then there's a ghost. It can appear for the tiniest fraction of a second right after the sprite. It's a faint green glow, like an aurora. They were first discovered in 2014, and official confirmation by the scientific community only appeared in 2019. They're still poorly understood, but there's a hypothesis that ghosts have something in common with auroras. At least their color is green, and it may arise due to excited oxygen atoms. Sometimes we can spot trolls along with sprites. They look like pillars that support a sprite. It's a red glow at the end of the sprite's tentacles. The next moment, the troll releases a red streak down from itself. And if we climb even higher, we can see the elves. They only appear for 1 millisecond. It's a dim, flat glow that appears during thunderstorms in the ionosphere at an altitude of about 62 miles above sea level. Elves can be as wide as the distance between New York and Washington, D.C. Elves were first discovered during space shuttle flights in 1990. And these are pixies. They weren't discovered until 2000. Scientists observed bright, brief, luminous events for 20 minutes. Although they look like lightning striking inside a cloud, they have nothing to do with them. Pixies are smaller than 100 meters, which is about 330 feet. We shouldn't forget that any lightning is extremely dangerous for humans, and if you're caught in a severe thunderstorm, you need to leave its epicenter immediately. You can determine how far you are from the epicenter easily. The speed of light is much faster than the speed of sound. So, when lightning strikes, it takes a couple of seconds until you hear the thunder. So, you need to measure that interval. Lightning! Now count the seconds. Every second of thunder delay after lightning is about 1,150 feet. That's the distance a wave of sound travels in 1 second. So if the thunder delay after a lightning strike is 5 seconds, you're about 1 mile from the lightning. You can also tell if there will be a thunderstorm by the smell. The air before a thunderstorm seems unusually fresh. This is because the air currents bring in ozone molecules from the upper atmosphere. The same ozone protects us from harmful ultraviolet rays and transfers heat from the sun to the atmosphere. What we use to breathe is the oxygen of 2 atoms. Add 1 more and you get ozone. Ultraviolet light breaks down the 2 oxygen atoms and is absorbed by them. These broken atoms are then attached to the normal double oxygen atoms. When an ultraviolet beam strikes an ozone molecule, it knocks 1 oxygen atom out of the chain again. But ozone tends to regenerate, so the lost oxygen is reattached to other double atoms. But the ozone layer began getting damaged when humanity started emitting harmful gas into the atmosphere. Freon is to blame. It's the gas we were using in old refrigerators. The freon molecule contains harmful chlorine atoms. Ultraviolet rays knock this atom out of the molecule. Then that chlorine atom steals 1 oxygen atom from ozone, and we have a double oxygen molecule that can't regenerate and save us from the harmful ultraviolet rays. This causes a hole to appear in the ozone layer. The most famous ozone hole was over Antarctica, but when humanity banned the use of harmful chemicals, this hole began to recover. It's not that the hole will close completely, it will just return to the way it was before.
Uh-oh, a strong wind is blowing. Black clouds cover the sky. Thunder is rumbling and is pouring down with rain. A storm is coming, but you don't care. You're sitting in your apartment listening to music and typing something on your computer. You hear a thunderclap. Look out the window and see a heavy downpour, a tornado, and lightning flashes. You close all the windows and go back to the computer. And then, bam! It seems that lightning has struck near your house. Your laptop and all electrical appliances in the home go off. The light goes out. You get scared. At this moment, you hear a strange hissing sound. You see how, like a phantom, a round glowing ball of electricity flies into your house through a closed window. It penetrates your room, hovers in the air, waits for something, and then flies back through the walls. The lights turn on, and everything comes back to normal. You've just seen a real natural phenomenon called ball lightning, and you're fortunate to be alive after meeting it. This is a rare phenomenon. Ball lightning occurs during a thunderstorm in the form of a floating sphere. It can change color from blue to orange and yellow. It's the approximate size of a basketball, but can also be much more significant. This lightning makes a hissing sound and a pungent smell. Phew! The first records of ball lightning were made in 1638 in England. Then, a giant glowing ball flew into the church window. Since then, there have been a lot of evidence of how ball lightning got into houses and frightened people. In the 20th and 21st centuries, scientists actively investigated this phenomenon. They found out that half of the cases with ball lightning were just hallucinations caused by magnetic fields during a thunderstorm. But they couldn't wholly refute the fact of the existence of ball lightning. They agreed that this phenomenon existed, and once they even managed to record it. The phenomenon of ball lightning was caught in China. Researchers studied the behavior of thunderstorms in 2012 using video cameras and spectrometers. They saw an unusual lightning strike, after which the ball appeared. It flew horizontally about 33 feet and disappeared. The spectrometer showed that the ball consisted of silicon, iron, and calcium. If it's real, then what is its nature? There are several theories. Perhaps the ball lightning occurs as a result of a lightning strike on the ground. Oxygen and evaporated elements from the soil create a reaction in the form of a round clot of energy. This explains why the spectrometer in 2012 recorded the same calcium in the ball lightning as in the ground. Another theory says that glass can generate these balls. Atmospheric ions accumulate on the glass surface and create an electric field. Together with a lightning strike, this field turns into ball lightning. That's why there's so much evidence that the sphere flies into the building through the window. In 2016, scientists pointed out that a lightning strike on the ground created microwave radiation that can form into a plasma bubble. This floating electric plasma takes a round shape and hovers in the air for a few seconds. Earthquakes can cause ball lightning too. During ground tremors, flashes of light appear from the depths of the crust. It's like lightning that comes not from the sky, but from the ground. Some of these lights may look like floating blue spheres. In 2014, scientists studied earthquake lights and found that some rocks emit electrical discharges during seismic wave impacts. In 2006, researchers at a university in Tel Aviv created a laboratory to study ball lightning. They used microwave radiation to recreate a lightning-like electric charge. In 2018, quantum physicists made a complex synthetic magnetic field similar to ball lightning. Physicists, chemists, meteorologists, and other scientists have conducted research and laboratory experiments many times to understand the nature of this phenomenon. But so far, no one has succeeded. Other glowing balls are less dangerous, but still mysterious. In clear weather, you can see strange glowing lights away from cities, somewhere in a swampy area. Previously, when there was no electricity, people noticed these lights. They thought someone needed help. What if some guy is stuck in the swamp and shines a kerosene lamp to get seen? People went to these lights to help, but fell into the swamp, and the light either flew away or disappeared. Some records speak of several lights at once. They moved quickly and changed their colors. Many believe that these were some kind of mystical creatures that lured people into traps. But over time, scientists managed to uncover the mystery of this phenomenon. Bioluminescent fungi and algae grow in swampy places. Sometimes they glow with blue light and create the illusion of glowing lights from a distance. Also, there's a lot of plant material in the swamps: leaves, grass, mud, clay, and tree branches. These substances decompose rapidly in humid conditions and release methane. As soon as methane contacts air, it ignites. The flame flies over the swamp in the form of a burning ball. Mysterious lights appear not only in swamps. People see them in deserts or mountainous areas. Sometimes it's headlights from cars. In other cases, it's the signal lights of an airplane. But in many cases, the nature of such lights remains unknown. And now, imagine a huge ball the size of a small city. It's like a dome, covers a large area, and protects it from tornadoes and storms. This phenomenon is called the Delco weather bubble and is located in Delaware County, Pennsylvania. That's how it all started. In 1996, one of the strongest snowstorms of the 20th century hit the U.S. East Coast. It was named the Blizzard of 1996. It covered almost all of Pennsylvania, but in the small town of Delaware County, Delco for short, the weather was good. The storm raged around but didn't touch the city. Since that year, the locals have believed that an abnormal weather bubble protects their houses. However, there's no scientific evidence of the existence of this bubble. After the blizzard of 1996, there were several more storms in the area, and forecasters claimed some storms would also cover Delco. But contrary to their forecasts, the weather there was excellent. Strangely, there is no meteorological evidence of this. One of the residents decided to investigate this phenomenon seriously. He followed the weather forecasts, looked at satellite photos, and saw how the black clouds diverged around the city. It rained heavily in the neighboring towns, but not Delco. This seems like convincing proof. And the question remains, should we believe the locals? There's one scientific explanation explaining the nature of this phenomenon. Storms may weaken here thanks to the sea air that accumulates in the Delco area. The street and the city's surrounding area are filled with this humid, cold air. It creates a sort of stabilization of the atmosphere, and when intense storms from the west collide with Delco's air, they lose a significant part of their strength. And it seems as if bad weather just bypasses the city. But there's another explanation, a psychological one. All the known information about the weather bubble came from the stories of residents. They seek confirmation of this phenomenon and write about it on social media. Someone said that they'd seen a tornado pass by his house. Others claimed that the bubble had saved them from a downpour. People think that it didn't affect others if there was no trouble with their house. Imagine the TV says that a storm has started in your city. You look out of the window and see a clear sky, no wind and rain. It seems to you that the bubble has saved you again. Although behind you, a few hundred feet from your backyard, a tornado is raging and tearing the roofs off of buildings. But you didn't see it and wrote to the social network that Delco has saved your city again. In this sense, the weather bubble becomes more like a virtual one, thanks to the people who write about it.
Bright, colorful flashes of pink and green light up the sky. You're watching it from your backyard in Pennsylvania. That's not something you're used to, but it's very likely to happen more often in the near future as the northern lights are shifting south. Northern lights, or auroras, appear as a result of solar storms. The sun is a huge ball of molten gases that are constantly moving, so such storms aren't rare. Our star produces a huge amount of energy that goes our way. It travels as electrical charges at the speed of about 3 million miles per hour, no big deal. When all those tiny particles from the sun reach Earth's atmosphere, they give some of the energy to atoms and molecules in its upper layer. The atoms and molecules can't hold it and give it off as light. You can see it as spectacular auroras around the magnetic poles of the northern and southern hemispheres. If you were watching them from space, they'd look like large ovals. The brightness, colors, and shapes auroras take depend on the altitude where the lights are formed and what particles take part in the process. In the northern hemisphere, locations like Alaska, Canada, and much of Scandinavia normally get to see the brightest lights. The biggest solar storm ever was recorded in 1859, and it was so powerful that the northern lights were spotted in Cuba and Honolulu, and southern lights were seen as far up as Santiago, Chile. In latitudes like that of New York, people were able to read newspapers in the dark under those northern lights alone. If something similar happened today, it would have caused $1 to $2 trillion in damage. With solar activity and pressure from the solar winds increasing, the aurora belt's borders are currently shifting south. Solar activity goes in cycles, each of them 11 years long. We're now in solar cycle 25, which started in December 2019, and will reach its maximum strength between November 2024 and March 2026. So, geomagnetic storms will become stronger and probably even reach G5 levels. Those levels are their strength ratings. For you to see the northern lights south of the Great Lakes, a storm must be rated at least G3. G5 storms will be able to produce auroras that will even reach Florida. In case you don't want to wait for the sun activity to peak in 2025, head north if you're in the northern hemisphere, or south if you're in the southern hemisphere. Auroras down there are known as the southern lights, or aurora australis. It doesn't have to be cold for you to see the northern lights, it just has to be dark. Auroras are active throughout the year. You can't see them from April to August in the northernmost parts of the world because it's light 24/7. It's also important that there isn't any precipitation or clouds in the sky. Those will block your view. Light pollution won't help either, so move away from any cities. Try to get to an elevation to maximize your chances of spotting the lights. They can appear in a whole variety of colors, including white-gray. The green-yellow part you're most likely to imagine while thinking of the lights is just the easiest to spot with an unaided human eye. Sometimes you might not see the lights at all, but your camera will still catch them. They might seem dangerously close to Earth, but the closest the northern lights ever get to us is 50 miles. For comparison, planes normally fly at around 6 miles above the surface, and that already seems like a lot. The distance from Earth defines the color of the auroras. When atoms giving us this spectacular show collide closer to Earth, you can see blues and violets in the sky. Green and red auroras are born further away from our planet. Earth isn't the only planet to have northern lights. Jupiter and Saturn both have strong magnetic fields, and scientists spotted auroras up there using the Hubble Space Telescope and the Cassini and Galileo spacecraft. It looks like Saturn's auroras are also caused by solar winds, but it's not so clear about Jupiter. Despite what you can often see online, the northern lights aren't going to disappear altogether. Once the sun passes its activity peak and becomes less active, both the northern and the southern lights will happen less frequently, but will still be gorgeous. Another beautiful, rare phenomenon is called the green flash. It happens shortly after sunset or before sunrise when the sun is almost entirely below the horizon, and the Earth's atmosphere bends and scatters light from it. People mostly spot it over the ocean. It can also be yellow, blue, or purple. About once a year, you can spot a rare firenado in the US. Fire tornadoes start when a strong wind picks up heat from a fire. They are made of a flame or ash. They're different from regular tornadoes because they don't start from cyclones. Firenadoes are about as tall as the Leaning Tower of Pisa. Unlike firenadoes, fire rainbows or rainbow clouds don't cause any damage at all as they don't have anything to do with fire. You can only see them when the sun is very high in the sky and its light is passing through ice clouds, so they're pretty rare. The rainbow halos are just as unique. Again, it takes a specific type of ice crystals in the clouds of the surface of the Earth to bend light from the sun into a perfect ring. The same thing can happen with moonlight. The only difference will be that the moon halos are usually white and sun halos can be rainbow colored. A white rainbow is another rare illusion, this time created by fog and water. Like a usual rainbow, it's formed when light is shining through droplets of water. It loses color because fog droplets are hundreds of times smaller than those of rain. A white rainbow is sometimes mistaken for a moonbow. You can spot this one at nighttime as the moon illuminates it. That's why it's not so bright. If you ever see an upside-down rainbow in the sky, that's a circumzenithal arc. It's not really a rainbow, but a kind of halo like those around the sun or the moon. This optical phenomenon is caused by ice crystals in the upper atmosphere. You have the best chance to see a circumzenithal arc when the sun is rather low in the sky. It happens super rarely, but it can rain without a single cloud in the sky. It's sometimes called a sun shower because it looks like the rain is falling straight from the sun. In reality, rain clouds are at a distance from that specific location. With sun rays being angled, the clouds become out of sight. Then, it takes just a little wind to blow the rain in your direction. If you ever travel to regions with high altitudes, you might see something called penitentes. Those ice spikes form only in a really cold and elevated environment where the air is dry. The sunlight turns ice directly into vapor instead of melting it into water. That's why these blades of snow and ice up to 15 feet tall start to pop up on the surface of the Earth. One of the rarest types of clouds is lenticular clouds that look like giant mountain hats. They're formed when moist air travels over a mountain or a mountain range and gets into an area of turbulence. Volcanoes can produce bolts of lightning. They're formed in columns of volcanic ash through friction and static electricity to connect the positively and negatively charged particles. To understand how it works, you can rub a balloon across your hair or your feet across a carpet and then touch a metal doorknob. Once a year, just for a few moments, a waterfall in Yosemite turns into a fireball. In winter and early spring, two streams flow down El Capitan Mountain. In perfect conditions in February, when the sun is hiding behind the horizon, it gets into the right position to reflect off the wall and color the water into fiery orange.
So tonight, go out and look at the moon through a telescope, and you'll see many craters. No one still knows how they appeared there. Some of them have formed recently. Scientists have discovered a double crater on the moon that appeared for a strange reason. In March, a rocket crashed into the moon, and no one knows who owned it and why it left such a trail. If a regular rocket had fallen there, it would have left one hole. A standard space rocket has a heavy engine on one side and a lighter fuel tank on the other. But this time, there had to be two heavy sides on one rocket to leave a double crater. That's strange. No one knows what it is, and no one has claimed to be the owner. It was probably part of a large 3-ton rocket. This piece had been flying in space for several years. At first, astronomers thought it belonged to SpaceX, but the company denied this claim. Also, they thought that China had launched the rocket, but this was also wrong. In the near future, NASA experts hope to find out the truth. The problem with tracking such rockets and space debris is that this is quite expensive. Companies don't want to spend too much money on it. But soon, this will change. People will have to spend billions of dollars to monitor garbage or destroy it, since it's getting too crowded in space. Space companies will have to solve this problem, as it poses a serious danger to satellites and spacecraft. Just take a look. There are millions of pieces of satellites and rockets flying in space. Some of them are the size of a basketball, others are as tiny as a raindrop. The total weight of all this debris is about 9,000 tons. This is almost 2,000 tons heavier than the Eiffel Tower. Okay, all this garbage is floating there, so what? The problem is that it's not just floating, it's moving at a speed of 17,500 miles per hour. A tennis ball will fall apart into several pieces at such a speed on the surface of our planet because of air resistance. But there's no air in space. Nothing prevents a tiny piece of metal from reaching a speed 20 times faster than the speed of sound. A piece of paint at this speed can easily damage the casing of a spaceship. Once, several shuttle portholes were replaced because of the damage caused by flying chunks of paint. Now imagine what a piece of metal the size of a basketball can do to a spaceship. It could bring down the International Space Station. Many satellites were destroyed by space debris that crashed into them, and when those satellites exploded, they burst into thousands of small parts, which also turned into dangerous flying objects. For example, in 1996, a fragment of a rocket damaged 10 years earlier crashed into a French satellite. In 2009, a failed spacecraft destroyed another commercial ship. As a result of the collision, about 2,300 tracked fragments appeared, as well as lots of tiny untracked ones. Today, satellite operators receive warnings about potential collisions with space debris, but these messages are often either inaccurate or reach the operators too late. Imagine that a screw is flying at great speed toward your satellite. You'll hardly have time to dodge it. Perhaps it won't hit your satellite at all. This uncertainty makes these warning sensors useless. The problem becomes much more serious when it concerns the ISS crew members. A durable spacesuit can't guarantee protection from flying debris, and the station itself is too large to save itself from big objects by dodging. To keep astronauts safe, scientists have a catalog of things that are the size of softballs or bigger. They monitor thousands of fragments and analyze their trajectories, material, and dimensions. Next, they use the pizza box method to dodge garbage. This is the unofficial name for an imaginary square that is used to calculate the risks of a collision with space debris. So imagine a giant pizza box. It is 2.5 miles deep, 30 miles wide, and 30 miles long. Now put the entire International Space Station in this box. Yeah, okay, you can have it with pepperoni. Anyway, if some space object is heading toward the edge of the box, the crew will begin to develop a plan of action. The box's radius is quite large compared to the station, since it's difficult to calculate the debris' trajectory. If there's a chance that something might approach the box, then it can also damage the station. When operators receive a signal about approaching debris, they analyze it. Depending on the data received, the crew begins to act in a certain way. If it's something small and heading for some part of the ISS, the astronauts should evacuate from this part, and after that, they'll do repairs there. If something big is approaching, the entire station can perform an evasive maneuver with the help of the engines or a docked spacecraft. One such trick required about 5 hours of hard work. The station is a big, clumsy ship, so it's important to know about the threat in advance. From 1999 to 2020, the ISS made 29 maneuvers to avoid collisions. 3 of them occurred in 2020, and there will be more since the amount of garbage increases. If some object is too big and fast and can damage critical components, and it's impossible to dodge, the entire crew will have to evacuate. In the future, NASA and other space agencies will have to think about how to destroy this debris or remove it from orbit. One option is catching everything with extensive space nets. One agency suggested developing a solar sail that clings to debris and propels it to a low orbit. Another wanted to use an electrodynamic cable to slow down the speed of space debris with the current. This maneuver will cause space garbage to move toward the surface of Earth and burn up in the atmosphere. But what if one of these pieces still reaches the ground? Even now, many satellite parts fall on Earth. Fortunately, this is not so dangerous. The probability of cosmic garbage falling on your house is minimal. In addition, 70% of our planet is covered with water. Of the remaining 30%, only 3 to 10% are occupied by people. Almost all space debris falls into the ocean or unpopulated parts of dry land. But let's say some part of a satellite damages your property. In that case, the company that owns this space object will cover the losses. Such cases are rare and occur because of accidents in orbit. But sometimes, companies intentionally abandon their satellites. If a spacecraft is out of order, they turn it off and use the remaining fuel to slow it out of orbit and drop it in a safe place. Almost all such objects fall in the region of the spacecraft cemetery. It's located at the most remote point on Earth, Point Nemo. It's in the southern Pacific Ocean, east of New Zealand. The nearest island is more than 1,000 miles away. The distance to the International Space Station is much smaller. It's challenging to get to this place since no ships travel there. That's why most satellites end up in that area. It looks like an endless sea. The ocean there absorbs explosive waves of any power without consequences. Even if some fallen ship or rocket causes a giant wave, it dissipates long before it reaches dry land. Fish and other marine creatures are also not at risk. Point Nemo is one of the least inhabited areas on Earth. Underwater currents carry nutrients through the ocean, and tiny living creatures such as phytoplankton and other organisms feed on them. But these currents don't reach Point Nemo. Another way to deliver nutrients in the ocean is wind, but there's almost no wind at Point Nemo. This place doesn't have enough food to let large life forms develop. Just imagine how lonely and silent it is there. Sometimes a broken rocket breaks the silence, crashing into the water at great speed and descending to the seabed, where thousands of other satellites are waiting to welcome it.
People haven't set foot on the moon in several decades, but the situation is going to change soon. NASA's Artemis program is going to send a few missions to Earth's natural satellite. The first astronauts might step on the surface of the moon already in 2025, as part of Artemis 3, if the current schedule holds, that is. And then the next stage will start, and it will be an even more ambitious project than sending humans to the moon again. NASA wants to construct a base camp at our satellite's south pole. Such an outpost will help the Artemis mission to break the previous record for the longest stay on the moon. So far, it's 74 hours, 59 minutes, and 38 seconds. Plus, such a camp can serve as a jumping-off point for missions setting off for deep space. According to NASA, at first it's going to be a small camp, accommodating missions for a week or two. But soon, it'll grow in size and complexity and will be able to sustain crews for a couple of months at a time. There might also be an open-top rover similar to the one used in the Apollo missions and an RV. These options can provide mobility for astronauts while they live and work at the camp. With each new trip, the level of comfort of space explorers will increase. Specialists are now developing the technologies that will help people to work more easily on the moon, far away from home. There's also hope that building such a camp can help us prepare for an even more challenging step: human exploration of Mars. For the camp to function properly, it's very important to be able to find and extract resources from the satellite's rocks and dust. These resources can include water ice, metals, oxygen, and even some building materials. It'll help to lighten the load with supplies delivered to the moon. It can also potentially allow astronauts to remain there for longer periods of time. Now, why the lunar South Pole? There are two very important reasons. First, building the base camp there will allow astronauts to have periods of continuous light from the sun. The moon is tilted in such a way that its south pole experiences up to 2 months of continuous light every year, when the sun is circling above the horizon all the time. And all this abundant sunlight can provide the camp with a lot of solar power. At the moment, NASA is trying to design a solar array that could stay more than 30 feet in the air. This way, it'll be able to make the most of the available sunlight. The second reason for choosing this location is deep craters that have been shrouded in darkness for billions of years, also because of the moon's peculiar tilt. Some of these craters haven't seen sunlight since the time of their formation. They're also known as permanently shadowed regions, and that's where scientists have found evidence of water ice. If we manage to access this frozen water and it turns out there's a lot of it there, it'll be hugely valuable for the inhabitants of the base camp. Plus, it might supply flights back to Earth, or further on to Mars. We don't know yet whether there's a lot of water in that region or whether it's free of contaminants. But NASA is going to find out. One of the ways to do it is to use Viper. This mobile robot is likely to arrive at the lunar South Pole in 2024. The Lunar Terrain Vehicle, or LTV for short, is scheduled to arrive on a mission in 2025. Astronauts will be able to operate it remotely, and it's likely to be able to avoid such hazards as rocks and craters on its own. Astronauts will then explore their surroundings either from the safety of the lander on earlier missions or later on from the base camp itself. Plus, NASA will use the LTV to conduct scientific or mission-related work even during periods of time when there will be no humans on the moon. The vehicle will play a crucial role in searching for water ice and other resources. But even though the LTV's remote-controlled capabilities are quite innovative, its design isn't going to change much. It'll look almost like the rovers that have come before it. If astronauts decide to drive the vehicle with its top open, they will have to put on their spacesuits, and that's not very comfortable. Donning such a suit can easily take hours. Plus, the duration of missions always depends on how much oxygen each astronaut's spacesuit has left. That's where NASA's RV-like concept, known as the Habitable Mobility Platform, comes into play. If this project succeeds, the RV will have a pressurized interior and life support systems, meaning passengers will be able to have a ride without their spacesuits on. This will definitely make life easier for astronauts. The final design of the vehicle isn't ready yet, but the main goal is to allow several people to live and work inside the vehicle for up to 2 weeks. Now let's have a look at what the future lunar cabin might look like. Its design hasn't been finalized either, but NASA is looking at modular and inflatable structures. It may help to create larger spaces for crews to live in. Plus, such kinds of structures are more compact and lightweight, so it will be easier to transport them to the moon. But there's one more intriguing possibility. How about a large-scale 3D printer that will use lunar soil and rock as its raw material? Such a machine might be able to produce bricks and other shapes, assembling dwellings from scratch. A prototype 3D printer is now building a test structure in Houston. Also, the first towns on the moon could probably be built in craters. They might be covered with protective materials like plastic, reinforced with a net made of titanium and UV-resistant superfiber. The inhabitants would have to access their homes through airlock entrances dug into a mound. Bilbo Baggins would surely appreciate their aesthetics. On the moon, gravity is way weaker than on our home planet. And while it can make it easier for astronauts to walk and even run on the moon's surface, it's not so great in the long run. That's why inside the lunar base, there might be an artificial gravitational field. Without it, people would have problems with coordination, balance, and orientation in space. Plus, weight-bearing bones would lose 1 to 5% of mineral density per month. A geologist from the University of Notre Dame, who's been studying samples of lunar soil, says that rocks or dust may have a key role in protecting astronauts from radiation coming from solar flares and cosmic rays. On Earth, the planet's atmosphere and its magnetic field filter out most of this harmful radiation. But the moon doesn't have the same shield because there's no atmosphere like on our planet there. The very weak one that our natural satellite has is made up of some unusual gases that haven't been found in the atmosphere of Earth, Mars, or Venus. That's why people working there will need extra protection. The experts say that up to 6 feet of lunar material might be needed to shield astronauts from the radiation. But besides building materials and water, there's another crucial resource on the moon, and it's oxygen. NASA hopes to start extracting this gas from moon rocks. They also hope to find metals like aluminum. This could allow astronauts to live off the land, and the base would become much more self-sufficient than expected. It could turn into a resupply station for spaceships heading for Mars. But a colony on Mars would cost us trillions of dollars to construct and inhabit. It would take a long time for even one cargo ship to reach the red planet. Lunar camps are much easier to build and maintain. There will likely be direct spaceship routes connecting the satellite with Earth, and people will need just 3 days to travel between these 2 points. That's one of the reasons the colonies on the moon will be growing, developing, and changing non-stop. Do you know that these days our planet has not one, but several moons? Well, kind of. Astronomers have recently discovered another moon orbiting Earth. But it's not what you might be imagining. It's actually an asteroid trailing along beside our planet in a complex semi-orbit. The asteroid was named 2023 FW13, and instead of simply orbiting our planet like the moon does, it orbits the sun. But its orbit is so unusual that it causes the asteroid to circle Earth too, keeping it in roughly the same area as our planet, even though it doesn't orbit it directly. You've probably already realized that 2023 FW13 isn't the kind of moon where we could send a mission. It's way smaller and farther away than our natural satellite. The newly found space object is a mere 50 feet across and is floating 9 million miles away, and that's when it's the closest to Earth. This distance is around 35 times as great as that between our planet and the moon. On the other hand, cosmically speaking, it's just next door. For the first time, the quasi-moon was spotted by astronomers at the Pan-STARRS Observatory on Haleakala in Hawaii in March 2023. Now, a quasi-moon is a space object which shares a similar orbital path with a planet, even though it doesn't orbit this planet directly. Plus, it has a steady relative position to this planet. True moons always keep a relatively consistent distance from their parent planet, but quasi-moons have more complex paths. That's because of the combined gravitational influences of the Sun and the planet itself. Quasi-moons usually have horseshoe or tadpole-like orbits. To put it simply, you can see them travel ahead or behind a planet when it orbits the Sun. Such an orbit is truly unusual, and it occurs because the gravitational pull between the Sun, the planet, and the quasi-moon results in a complex dynamic, leading to a delicate balance in the trajectory of the quasi-moon. When a quasi-moon moves ahead of a planet, it tends to slow down with time, and in the end it falls behind because of the gravitational influence of the planet. Similarly, when a quasi-moon falls behind at first, it later starts speeding up and begins to move ahead of the planet. This is what creates that horseshoe shape if you look at this dance from a fixed point in space. At the same time, the orbit will look like a tadpole from the perspective of the planet. Scientists love quasi-moons because they present great research possibilities. Their interesting orbits make them perfect for studying gravitational influences and the intricacies of space mechanics. Plus, they're usually close to their parent planets, which can also offer insights into the formation and evolution of planetary systems. And who knows, maybe at one point in the future, they'll help us with space exploration. Missions to such quasi-moons could give us important information about different celestial bodies and help with the exploration of the solar system. But let's get back to our tiny moon. While it's still being studied, current data suggests that 2023 FW13 entered its current orbit at least 2,100 years ago. And according to simulations based on preliminary orbital calculations, the quasi-moon will accompany Earth for another 1,700 years or so. The good news is that the asteroid won't end up on a collision course with Earth, despite traveling relatively close to our planet. A few years ago, another asteroid was pulled into Earth's orbit and started to travel along with our planet. No larger than an average car, it was still a big deal. Out of more than 1 million asteroids astronomers know about, it was only the second one to orbit our planet. Called 2020 CD3, it became our temporary mini-moon. It wasn't going to stay with Earth for long, though. The asteroid is following a random orbit and is slowly drifting away. 2020 CD3 will make another close pass to Earth in March 2044, though it will most likely not be caught by Earth again because of the greater approach distance. Temporarily captured objects, such as this one, are rare. They need to have a specific direction and speed to be captured by Earth's gravitational pull. Otherwise, they either crash into the planet or fly in another direction. And in 2016, astronomers discovered another space rock and called it Kamo'olelewa. There was one absolutely amazing thing about this space traveler. Astronomers suspect that this celestial body could have formed after splitting off the moon during an ancient collision with an asteroid. Yes, it means it might be a piece of our moon. When specialists examined the space body and analyzed its composition, The results didn't match any of the more than 2,000 near-Earth asteroids studied before. Kamo-O'alewa was too tiny and too far away for regular telescopes to study it. That's why the researchers had to find a more powerful telescope to learn more about this unusual find. After using the Large Binocular Telescope, one of the largest optical telescopes in America, and the Infrared Lowell Discovery Telescope, the scientists finally figured out what the asteroid was made of, and what they had discovered surprised them. The asteroid had light spectra similar to those of the samples of lunar material delivered to Earth by the 1960s and 1970s Apollo missions. Astronomers admit that there might be other asteroids with the same spectra, but so far they haven't found anything like that. Kamo-O'alewa is another quasi-satellite of our planet. Its orbit is a bit tilted and slightly elongated, so the rock keeps leaping ahead and then falling behind Earth. In other words, it performs constant loops around us. At its closest, the 130-foot-wide asteroid gets to the distance of around 40 times that of the Moon. According to the results of orbital analysis, the rock has been following Earth for at least 100 years. We found more than 480 lunar meteorites on our planet. It may mean that pieces of our natural satellite travel through space pretty regularly. And Kamo-O'alewa might as well just be the first discovered large rock split off the Moon as a result of an ancient collision. Now we've already talked about quasi-moons. Let's find out more about asteroids. These space bodies are often called minor planets or planetoids. They're usually rocky leftovers from the early formation of our solar system that occurred around 4.6 billion years ago. They're mainly found in the asteroid belt between the orbits of Mars and Jupiter. Asteroids can be very different in size, from tiny dust particles and modestly sized boulders to huge bodies reaching 600 miles across. Asteroids often have irregular shapes, especially smaller ones. At the same time, large space bodies can have more of a spherical shape. Unlike planets, asteroids don't consist of layers. They're made of different kinds of metals and rocks and have no atmosphere. Funnily enough, some asteroids have moons of their own, and there are even asteroid binaries where two asteroids of similar size orbit each other. The asteroid belt located between the orbits of Mars and Jupiter has the largest number of asteroids in our solar system. There are millions of space rocks there of various shapes and sizes. But despite such a huge number of asteroids, they're widespread across the vastness of the cosmos. And if you accidentally wandered into that region, the chances of your spacecraft colliding with an asteroid would be quite low. But even though most asteroids prefer to stay in the asteroid belt, some of them make their way closer to Earth. Those are called near-Earth asteroids. Experts monitor such asteroids because of the potential risk they pose. In the past, they did affect our planet. Think of that large one that most likely wiped dinosaurs off the face of the Earth. NASA and other international space agencies have sent a few missions to research asteroids. Some of them aim to retrieve samples from asteroids and return them to Earth for study. You've just moved to the Romanian city of Cluj-Napoca to make a startup, but you still have no idea what kind of horror will happen to you. In this city, you meet new people, and they tell you the story of the mysterious Hoia Baciu forest located to the west of the city. They say it's the country's scariest place, and locals call it the Bermuda Triangle of Transylvania. After the meeting, you decide to check out of this place. You drive to the edge of the forest. You go into the thicket and hear some singing of birds and the chirping of crickets. Somewhere in the distance, branches crackle and some animal howls. Some trees look ominous. Their branches look like many crooked arms. It seems to you that someone is watching you. You take a few more steps and find yourself in a small clearing. This is a perfect circle with grass, but no trees are growing here for some reason. You hear a moan from above. You look up and see a bright light within the trees. It gets brighter and brighter. And you lose consciousness. You're walking through the forest. It's already dark. You're cold, but fortunately, you can see the road ahead and your car. You come home, open the door, and look at the wall clock. This is strange. It's 10 p.m. now. You drove to the forest at 5 p.m., then took a little walk in the woods. Where did a few hours go? Then you notice something weird. There are strange red spots on your left hand. Are these burns or some rash? You go to the mirror and see that there's still a strange rash on your legs, arms, and neck. You tell your new friends about it, but they don't look surprised. They say that most legends about this forest are associated with time travel and memory lapses. Some say that they don't remember how they spent several hours in the forest and what they did there. Others talk about a strange rash on their hands. There are legends that the ghosts of lost people wander there, and some flying objects often visit this place. Someone said they had heard an ominous whisper in the forest and seen flying heads without bodies. The most famous legend says about a 5-year-old girl who disappeared in the forest. Rescuers and locals searched for her in the woods for several weeks, but found nothing. Then, a few years later, the girl came out of the forest alive and well, but the strangest thing is that she hadn't aged at all. She remained the same 5-year-old girl. After that, people began to think there was a time portal in the forest. If someone gets there, they'll find themselves in the future. It can be several hours or several years. Another myth is about a biologist who photographed the local fauna in the forest. He was taking photos of flowers and trees and caught on camera a strange object that flew in the sky. After that, people were sure that beings of extraterrestrial civilizations visited the forest. In the 15th century, a woman also disappeared there, but 500 years later, she came out of the forest completely healthy. Of course, it's unlikely that she was that woman. But a coin dated to the 1600s was found in her pocket. All these stories, as well as reports about phantoms, are rumors and myths. No one has yet been able to prove that the forest is really the center of paranormal activity. But if you decide to visit this place, ask local farmers who live near the forest to share some stories with you. Perhaps they'll tell you something more creepy and truthful. But this forest is really scary. You may feel anxious and inexplicable panic. There are many videos on the internet where tourists and travelers visited this forest and talked about unpleasant excitement and strange sounds. Also, you can see something strange in the woods at any moment with your own eyes. This is a round clearing where, for some reason, trees don't grow. There's grass and plants here. The soil here is the same as in the rest of the forest. Scientists took an analysis of the ground to check this. It's still unknown why there's no trees. Some trees in the forest have a strange curved shape. It's unclear what made them grow this way, but they look creepy. You can take a walk in the forest and check how true the legends about it are. But don't be afraid, you won't be alone. The Hoia Baciu Forest is one of Romania's most popular tourist destinations. Every year, thousands of fans of mystical riddles come here to test their nerves. But even if you don't find anything mystical in the forest, you will definitely enjoy the city. Externally, it's a beautiful city with cozy European architecture. But go inside the buildings and you'll see modern stylish bars and cafes. This place also attracts many IT specialists. You've probably heard of forests where some guy decorated all the trees with sinister dolls. But all this will seem like fun toys compared to what one guy found in County Park in Huntington, New York. He was walking in the forest and came to a small clearing. There, many trees had attached photos with images of people who were missing, just a person's face with his name, date, and place of disappearance. The guy recorded this place on video and posted it on the internet. The video became popular on Reddit. Its users discovered that all these people from photos went missing in different states. None of them were found alive. After such a terrible walk, the guy called the police. Soon, they found out that one local hung these photos on trees during a Halloween party. At the request of the police, he removed all the pictures. The case was closed. Imagine, you're lost in the woods. You've been walking in the forest for several hours. You tie your scarf to a tree branch and walk further along the narrow path. Half an hour later, you come to the tree with the scarf. You've never turned left or right. But why are you walking in circles then? The answer is a round forest. There's nothing mystical here, but it still attracts the attention of many tourists. The forest grows in the south of Japan. If you look at it from a bird's eye view, you'll see that trees grow in a circle, forming several layers. The closer to the center of this circle, the closer the trees are placed to each other. It resembles mysterious circular patterns in fields worldwide, but there's nothing fantastic here. No spaceships from another planet, and no natural anomaly made this, but people. In 1973, people planted trees in the shape of 10 concentric circles. It was an experiment that showed how cedars would grow in such unusual conditions. The trees began to grow in a convex shape, symmetrically fanning out. This proved that the size of the gaps between the trees affects their growth. Initially, according to the plan, people had to cut down trees. But the place became popular among tourists. Its photo quickly spread throughout the internet, so people decided to leave it untouched. You can also visit this forest and take beautiful drone shots.
One guy was walking in the forest of County Park in Huntington, New York. He came to a mysterious small area where he found cans of leftover food and a dirty blanket on the ground. Broken branches lay nearby, folded into a strange shape resembling a cage. And almost every tree had A4 sheets of paper hanging on it. There were about 10 sheets in total. Someone carelessly stuck them to the trunks with duct tape. All these sheets had photos of missing people and some information about their disappearance, a city where a person had vanished, and the local police phone number. The guy got scared and ran away, but before that, he filmed everything on his phone. He posted the video on the internet, and after that, Reddit users started their own investigation. It turned out all those people whose faces were printed on the posters were really missing. The man who discovered this place called the police. Fortunately, the officers quickly found the person who had done this. He threw a Halloween party and decided to hang posters of missing people to create a scary atmosphere. He removed all the photos, and the police stopped the investigation. Do you know these guys standing in the streets and holding a free hugs sign? Oh, it's so cute. They give so many positive vibes to people. And now, imagine you're walking through a dark forest alone, in the fog, and somewhere in the thicket, you notice a small gray house. It's hidden in the foliage and looks like an entrance to a bunker. It has no windows, only a dark doorway leading into the darkness. And you see that someone wrote, "Free Hugs Hut" on the wall. Yeah, not so cute this time. The exact location of this hut is unknown, but it's somewhere in the forests of Wisconsin. In fact, there's nothing terrible inside. Some garbage, dry leaves, cobwebs, and moss. Teenagers or homeless people like to hang out in this hut. Some of them probably had a good sense of humor if they wrote this phrase on the wall. But imagine if a scary, pale old woman had been living there for years. She'd be waiting for you inside to hug you tightly with her long, thin arms. We're in Greenville, South Carolina. There's a forest next to this town. You go there and notice a silhouette of a man. It's a big, sinister clown. You freeze in fear. He's just standing there among the trees and looking at you, smiling. Your knees are shaking. You're sweating. The clown raises his hand and beckons you with his finger. You don't go, and the clown makes a sad grimace. Then he takes some money out of his pocket and shows it to you. You finally return control over your body and run away from the forest as fast as you can. The scariest thing is that there are several such clowns in the woods of Greenville. Many locals have seen them walking among trees, attracting people's attention with green laser pointers. Fortunately, Instead of approaching them, residents went to the police station. The clowns called people to an abandoned house in the woods. Officers searched the building, but found nothing suspicious there. Still, locals prefer to avoid the forest. In forests, you can not only see, but also hear something terrible. For example, you can hear people's screams. These sounds come from nowhere and only at night. They can drive you mad if you don't know their nature. Coyotes live in forests all over North America, Canada, and Mexico. In the winter and spring, these animals howl and scream. Even if one coyote does it, it may seem that several of them have surrounded you. This illusion occurs because there are many different sounds in the forest. Birds, animals, the sound of falling rain, all this mixes with the coyotes howling, and it may seem to you that these animals are everywhere. Also, coyotes can change the tones of their voices and sound like people. Now let's forget about creepy things and find something beautiful in the woods. You're in a wide green clearing surrounded by a dense forest. You approach the thicket and see a hole in it. It's not a huge hollow, but a perfectly round passage. It looks like a portal to a magical land, and it's the creation of a famous Finnish artist named Antti Laitinen. He carefully cut the leaves and branches of the surrounding trees to create the perfect circle. He called it Broken Landscape. Besides this hole, the artist has many other unique works. He almost always deals with nature. He has created similar small circles resembling suns in the dense branches of leafless trees. You don't need to travel all over the world to see them. You can find photos of almost all of the artist's works on the internet. Let's move to the green forests of Scotland. Walking among trees and bushes, you can come across human figures. They stand motionless and faceless and reflect everything around them, quite literally. The famous Scottish sculptor Rob Mulholland made these statues out of plexiglass. This is a special kind of glass that reflects light like a mirror. 6 sculptures make up a large vestige installation. Each figure is in a different pose. They reflect trees, bushes, and grass, merging with the forest. In summer, when everything is blooming, the figures are beautiful. But in early spring or late autumn, they reflect nothing but grayness and lifelessness, which makes them look pretty creepy. The sculptor wanted to show a trace of people who lived in the forests many years ago, when humanity was more connected to nature. At that time, survival strongly depended on the state of forests and harvests, and these statues show this unity with the woods. There's a stunning forest in the south of Japan. There are no strange things there. It's weird by itself. If you look at the forest from a height, you'll see that the trees there grow in concentric circles. There are several of them. The closer to the center of this area, the closer the trees are standing to each other. In the outer row, the trees don't grow densely. The whole area resembles mysterious circular patterns in fields all over the world. But this is not a natural anomaly, but the result of human intervention. In 1973, people planted trees so that they created 10 concentric circles. The main idea of this experiment was to find out how cedars could grow in such circular conditions. The researchers called this place experimental forestry. Surprisingly, the trees began to grow in a convex shape, symmetrically fanning out. This proved that the size of the gaps between the trees greatly affected their growth. Initially, the scientists planned to cut the trees down after the experiment was over, but the place became very popular with tourists. People love to walk along these trails and take beautiful pictures using drones. The next strange finding is in the US. This is Vashon Highway, surrounded by a large forest. In its thicket, you can find an unusual tree with a rusty red bicycle inside its trunk. It looks like it grew into the trunk and became a part of it. Only the handlebars and one of the wheels stick out of the bark. The bike got into this tree in the 50s. One young guy received it as a present for his birthday, but he didn't like its handlebars and rugged wheels, so he just left this present near a bush and never came back for it. The bush turned out to be a young tree. With time, its trunk expanded and grew around the iron body of the bicycle. When locals noticed this, they decided not to remove the bike from the tree. And they did right, since this place became popular among tourists. The SCP Foundation is a secret organization that has one goal: to secure, contain, and protect the world from bizarre creatures and objects. The secret bases of this organization are hidden all over the world, and each of them contains scary, dangerous, harmless, miraculous, and simply crazy objects. And now, you'll see some of the weirdest. Object SCP-410. This is a colony of 14 individual beetles, similar to Scarabaeus, of different colors, from light blue to dark emerald. At first glance, they look like ordinary insects, but soon you notice that these bugs don't feed on leaves, larvae, and other food. They eat mistakes in a text.
What?
Put a paper with some text containing spelling or grammar mistakes and syntactic errors inside the terrarium with object SCP-410. The bugs run up to misspelled words or punctuation errors and eat them. 20 minutes later, the beetles secrete corrected letters or words from their bodies. This way, they completely edit the text. One member of SCP-410 can eat about 25,000 errors per day. The beetles can live without incorrect texts for about 2 days. Then they fall into a state of hibernation. To revive them, you need to put a text containing at least 50 errors next to them. Object SCP-2157 is a mysterious 200 square foot piece of land found in a forest in Japan. People are standing in different poses on this territory. 20 men and 21 women. They're all of different weights and heights. Their feet are on the ground, and their faces are turned to the west. People react to external stimuli. They blink, flinch, and get scared. And still, they're standing there, motionless like trees. They start screaming if somebody tries to lift them off the ground. But soil analysis has shown that SCP-2157 objects have no physical connection to the land. Their feet are in no way connected to the soil. A body scan has shown some earth inside their stomach. As soon as an SCP Foundation employee enters their territory, the people turn their heads in their direction and just stare at them. As soon as the outsider leaves, the people start looking to the west again. Monitoring of this object continues. Object SCP-621. It's hypnotic tulips. They look like ordinary tulips, but have bioluminescence. They get energy and other nutrients from the water and glow purple, blue, or green. This glow has a hypnotic effect on people and all nearby living beings. Bees, for example, start pollinating only these flowers, ignoring all other plants, which speeds up the reproduction of the tulips. Herbivores and other natural enemies avoid SCP-621. All this makes tulips a rapidly spreading species. While growing, SCP-621 takes all the nutrients from other plants growing nearby. It depletes the soil and consumes a lot of water. Under the influence of SCP-621, a person tends to take care of the plants and do everything to make them live as long as possible. For example, owners of large fields only take care of the tulips and ignore the rest of their farmlands under the influence of the glow.
Oh God, oh God.
Thus, tulips can spread until they capture all territories, and people will treat them with love because of their hypnotic effect. Therefore, it's crucial to keep tulips in an isolated greenhouse. Employees of the SCP Foundation water them every day and don't allow them to get out of the area. Object SCP-2559-J. While conducting research in one of the laboratories, a scientist accidentally opened a portal to another dimension. Little kittens began to come out of this portal in an endless stream. There's an infinitely huge world of kittens on the other side. If you pick up one of them, it will turn out to be an ordinary little kitty. The portal is located deep underground. It's not yet known how to close it. As a person approaches the doorway, they find themselves under the influence of cute kittens. Now, they're falling out into our reality at a rate of 3 kittens per second. SCP-999 is a large moving mass of transparent orange slime. It looks like jelly and has the viscosity of peanut butter. The shape and size of the creature are constantly changing. The object's surface is covered with a thin, flexible membrane that prevents the mass from spreading in different directions. It's a friendly creature that likes to play with people.
So cute.
It jumps on a person, hugs them, and makes gurgling sounds. SCP-999 emits a pleasant and constantly changing odor. It can be the smell of bacon, or fresh bedding, or roses. Touching SCP-999 causes euphoria that increases with the duration of contact. After that, a person experiences happiness for a long time. The object likes to completely envelop people and tickle them from head to heels. Object SCP-831 is a colony of unknown insects, similar in appearance and properties to ordinary termites. They feed on cellulose and water with sucrose. One termite lives from 25 to 40 days. The colony should remain in an empty, bright room under constant supervision. The walls and floor in the room should be made of high-strength steel. Employees should pour water with nutrients on the floor to maintain the life of these termites. You can only enter the room in a protective suit. When the termites get access to any object, they begin to use it to make the most primitive tools. For example, if you put a pencil in a room, termites will extract graphite and use the wooden body to create chips or something else. If you constantly feed it, the colony will grow and multiply. It will use primitive tools to create modern technologies. These termites know the properties of all substances and understand how to use them to create inventions. With the help of knowledge of the laws of physics and chemistry, and using wood and graphite from the pencil, in a few days, termites can create a primitive steam engine. The longer they stay in some place, and the more they multiply, the more perfect the inventions will be. A colony of millions of termites can create high-tech machines or radio transmitters that are incomprehensible to people. The boundaries of inventions are unknown, but the results of their work surpass all human technologies. This is why SCP Foundation employees keep SCP-831 in an enclosed, empty room. Object SCP-1689. It's a big bag of potatoes. In stable condition, it weighs about 110 pounds. There are about 200 tubers of ordinary potatoes inside. The inner space of the bag is much larger than it looks from the outside. The size of this area is unknown, but it's completely filled with potatoes. It's impossible to determine where the bag ends.
Oh my god.
SCP Foundation employees once went on an expedition inside the bag. Scientists created a special paste that broke down starch and turned potatoes into liquid slush. This way, the employees made a tunnel for themselves by spraying the substance and raking potato muck with shovels. That's when they found out that the space had a concrete floor, concrete walls, and a ceiling. They were walking inside some kind of building filled with potatoes. The team punched a hole in the wall and left the construction. The ground was covered with dried grass. There were only potatoes around. What was at the top was unknown, since the entire space was filled with potatoes. They also found a rusty bicycle there. The expedition failed. SCP-1689 leads to a world similar to ours, but something happened there, and it began to fill up with potatoes. Object SCP-623. This is a small room built in the 60s by a professor of biochemistry. There are only these items in the room: one blue sofa, one red sofa, one green sofa, one white plastic chair, one round table decorated in the same colors as the sofas, 7 chairs around the round table, and 7 multicolored lighting fixtures. All the furniture is nailed to the floor. Strange patterns are painted on the walls. They perfectly match the style and the location of the furniture. The acoustics and the appearance of the room, as well as the arrangements of all the objects, have a strong, pleasant effect on a person.
Oh, yes.
Inside the room, people feel harmony and happiness. They relax and become kind and harmless.
Oh.
Because of the feeling of peace and serenity, people can't take the furniture out of the room. They just want to dance, laugh, hug the table, lie on the floor, and cry with joy. But as soon as they leave the room, they immediately become angry, aggressive, and sad. The real world outside the room seems to be a dangerous and dark place. If you stay inside the object,